Chapter 267. In a shop in the Chenzhou prefecture, the Luo clan's patriarch was personally in charge of expanding the Luo clan's business to the Chenzhou prefecture. In fact, he had already handed over most of the Luo family's businesses to his sons to manage. He was only responsible for the general direction and would not interfere often. However, this matter was personally ordered by Lord Chu Xiao. If it were to succeed, the Luo family's strength would definitely soar. Therefore, the patriarch of the Luo family had to personally take action. The method of invading the businesses of other prefectures was actually very simple. It was just a competition of wealth and strength. The merchant caravans that came and went smuggled some contraband goods. If the aristocratic families of the Chen province spent 100 taels of silver to buy them, I would spend 110 taels of silver. If they wanted to buy something, the Luo clan would be more than willing to pay. After all, the entire Zhenzhou prefecture was united. If the Luo clan didn't have something, they could get it from other clans, and the price would be lower than the clans in the Chen prefecture. With the Luo family doing this, the merchants who came and went knew that they could sell their goods at a good price here and buy good things at a low price. Therefore, in just a few days, the Luo family had completely won over 90% of the merchants who came and went. Although the Luo family earned very little by doing this, and it was even easy for them to lose money in the end, the ones who suffered the most from the smuggling business in the entire Chen State Prefecture were the local martial arts forces in the Chen State Prefecture. When they couldn't take it anymore, they would either take the initiative to admit defeat to the Luo family's patriarch, or they would have to think of other ways to deal with them. The patriarch of the Luo clan had never considered the possibility that the forces of the Chen province would join forces like the Zhenzhou province. The patriarch of the Luo family knew very well what these local small forces were like. 100 people had 100 hearts. The Zhenzhou prefecture was able to have its current prosperity thanks to Chu Xiao's strong methods. At that moment, Patriarch Luo was not the only one in the shop. Tangya was also there, playing with an exquisite dragon-tailed soul-chasing dart. He looked a little bored. He thought that he would have something to do since he was here. He didn't expect that the local martial arts forces in Chenzhou prefecture were so cowardly. Not a single one of them did anything. The Luo family ancestor saw that Tangya was a bit bored, so he went over and said with a smile, "Is Sir Tang from the western Chushu land?" Tangya slumped lazily on the chair. He was a little surprised when he heard that. "Ha! How did an old man like you know?" The patriarch of the Luo family didn't care about how Tangya addressed him. Although Tangya was only in the physical invulnerability realm, he was one of Chu Xiao's trusted subordinates. Moreover, he was also an elite assassin of the Blue Dragon Society. If they really fought, he might not be a match for him. Old ancestor Luo said with a smile, "When I was young, I had also ventured outside. The place I went to the most was Sichuan." Sir Tang must have been in the Central Plains for a long time, but he could still vaguely hear the accent of Sichuan. The land of Sichuan and Shu is filled with outstanding people. Young talents like Lord Tang are not few. Tangya casually waved his hand and said, "All right, don't flatter me. You're referring to official Chu as a young elite. What kind of young elite am I? Sichuan was a place with outstanding people and rich lands, my ass. There was miasma everywhere in the mountains and forests, which could not be compared to the Central Plains. Look at Eastern Qi. It's located in the heart of the Central Plains. It's vast and has everything you want. In Sichuan, if you want these things, you can only rely on yourself." As Tangya chatted with the patriarch of the Luo family, a disciple of the Luo family rushed in and said, "Patriarch, the Zhang family of the Chenzhou prefecture is here." Tangya's eyes lit up. After waiting for so long, they're finally here. However, when Tangya rushed out and saw the people from the Zhang family, he immediately lost interest. He waved his hand and said to the patriarch of the Luo family, "You deal with it." There were more than 10 people from the Zhang family. However, the strongest one was only in the physical invulnerability realm, and he looked weak. Tangya didn't even have the interest to fight. Outside the Luo family's shop, the middle-aged man from the Zhang family looked at the patriarch of the Luo family and said in a deep voice, "The Luo family has crossed the line. This isn't the Zhenzhou prefecture. It's the Chenzhou prefecture." The patriarch of the Luo family said indifferently, "I only know that this is Guangzhong, and everyone here is from Guangzhong. What? Are you going to sell the Chenzhou prefecture to the Zhang family?" There were so many aristocratic families and sects in the Chenzhou prefecture, but the Zhang family was the first to jump out. Obviously, they were also pushed out to test the Luo family's intentions. Therefore, the patriarch of the Luo family didn't care. The physical invulnerability realm warrior from the Zhang family snorted. Don't play with words. This time, the Luo family broke the rules. What do you want? The patriarch of the Luo family said indifferently, you should know who the Luo family is working for. As the saying goes, a wise man submits to circumstances. If you know what's good for you and hand over a portion of the family's businesses, then we can all earn money together. The Luo family won't stay in the Chenzhou prefecture for long. However, if you don't know what's good for you, you've seen the consequences. The Chenzhou prefecture is a pile of loose sand. How can you compete with us? The physical invulnerability realm warrior from the Zhang family's expression suddenly changed. In fact, before he came, he had already been worried about whether the Luo family had that person behind them. After all, everyone knew that that person had absolute authority in the Zhenzhou prefecture. The Luo family was just a dog under that person's command. Now that this dog suddenly came out and bit people, they couldn't be sure if it was ordered by that person. Actually, it wasn't a big deal to rely on Chu Xiao. If they were in the Zhenzhou prefecture, they would also choose to rely on Chu Xiao. However, right now, Chu Xiao couldn't control them. What right did they have to show their filial piety to Chu Xiao? As a martial arts force in Guangzhou, it was normal for them to show their filial piety to the inspectors above them. However, they would only give these things to the patrol envoys who were in charge of them, and not to the patrol envoys of other places. No matter how famous Chu Xiao was, he could not control them. Their hands were so long. Let's talk about it when Chu Xiao becomes the disciplinary officer. The warrior from the Zhang family understood the situation. He snorted coldly and said, ridiculous. I don't care who the Luo family is working for. Rules are rules. From today onwards, the Luo family's shop will disappear from the Chenzhou prefecture. The patriarch of the Luo family waved his hand and said, beat them up. As soon as he finished speaking, dozens of warriors from the Luo family ran out of the shop and started attacking the people from the Zhang family. The patriarch of the Luo family had expected this. If he didn't use some tricks, how could these people obediently submit to Chu Xiao? In the past, they were even a little dissatisfied with Chu Xiao. It was only because of Chu Xiao's ruthless methods that they chose to submit. Now, although Chu Xiao had both strength and fame, he was still not the penal officer. His influence was so great that the forces in other prefectures wouldn't be dissatisfied. The warriors from the Luo family were stronger than the warriors from the Zhang family. After a quarter of an hour, the people from the Zhang family couldn't hold on anymore and had to retreat. The people from the Zhang family left in a sorry state. One of the disciples asked, Master, what should we do now? The physical invulnerability master of the Zhang family snorted and said, what should we do? Go and find Lord Zhang Taoran, of course. The Zhang family has been sending gifts to the inspector's hall all these years. Now that the Luo family has crossed the line, who will take care of it if he doesn't? If he can't take care of it, then we'll just admit defeat and give a part of our family's income to Chu Xiao in exchange for our safety. You're inspector. If you can't even protect your own forces and allow others to meddle, why should we give you so much? At this moment, Zhang Taoran happened to be in the inspector's hall of the Chenzhou prefecture. He was calculating his income for this month. Zhang Taoran was a cautious and cunning person. Previously, he only had one prefecture under his command. Among the inspectors in Guangxi, he was considered one of the weaker ones. However, he managed to take away one of Wei Hanshan's prefectures through the conflict between Wei Hanshan and Chu Xiao. His methods could be considered sharp. At this moment, his subordinate reported that the master of the Zhang family wanted to see him. Let him in, Zhang Taoran said calmly. The Chenzhou prefecture used to be Wei Hanshan's territory. However, after Zhang Taoran took over, there weren't any obstacles. Guangxi had its own rules. In the past, everyone acted according to the rules. Basically, no one was like Chu Xiao, who insisted on stirring up trouble. Therefore, when Zhang Taoran took over the Chenzhou prefecture, everything went smoothly. For the local aristocratic families, it was just a change of filial piety. However, when the master of the Zhang family came in, Zhang Taoran frowned and said, Master Zhang, who did you fight with? Why are you in such a sorry state? Although I'm the inspector of the Chenzhou prefecture, I can't intervene in the disputes between your families. I'm afraid you found the wrong person this time. Jiang Taoran thought that the master of the Zhang family had come to him because of some internal strife in the Quanzhou prefecture. However, Jiang Taoran would never agree to this. As the inspector, he was born to oppose these people. The deeper the conflicts between the aristocratic families in the prefecture, the easier it would be for him to manage. On the contrary, it would be troublesome if the aristocratic families were united. The master of the Zhang family quickly said, "It's not about the Quanzhou prefecture. It's about the Zhenzhou prefecture's Luo family and Chu Xiao. They don't follow the rules. My lord, you have to uphold justice for us this time." Then, the master of the Zhang family told Jiang Taoran everything that had happened. After hearing this, Jiang Taoran's expression immediately changed. He fiercely slammed the table and shouted, "Chu Xiao, what are you trying to do?" They had seen how Wei Zhouduan had deducted the reward he deserved and how the Nine Plains Wei family had provoked him. However, they had only been there to watch the show. In the end, only a few days had passed, and Chu Xiao had actually gone crazy to the point of touching his interests. What exactly was Chu Xiao trying to do? They had never provoked him. Chapter 268. In all fairness, Jiang Taoran did not want to be enemies with Chu Xiao. This was the case when Chu Xiao was still in the physical invulnerability realm and had just been appointed as an inspector. Jiang Taoran had always been a cautious person. Chu Xiao was recommended to the Guanzhong torture room by Chu Yuanxing. With Chu Yuanxing behind him, there was no reason for him to offend Chu Xiao. Therefore, he sat on the sidelines and watched the tigers fight. When Chu Xiao and Wei Hanshan were locked in a fierce battle, he secretly took action and paid a small price to get Wei Hanshan's Quanzhou prefecture from Wei Zhouduan. Now that Chu Xiao had reached the Three-Flower Realm and was famous in Jianghu during the God Weapon Conference, it could be said that he was the face of the Guanzhong torture room. Jiang Taoran did not want to provoke Chu Xiao at all. However, he did not want to provoke Chu Xiao. Unfortunately, Chu Xiao had come to provoke him. He did not provoke anyone, but Chu Xiao had extended his hand into his territory. How could Jiang Taoran tolerate this? If he tolerated it, his reputation in the two prefectures under his command would be completely destroyed. Therefore, Jiang Taoran coldly snorted and said, "Wait, I will take my men to check it out." With that, Jiang Taoran took his men and went straight to the Luo family's shop. At this time, when the Luo family saw that Jiang Taoran had personally appeared, the Luo family's great ancestor quickly said to Tangya, "Master Tang, I will leave the rest to you." The Luo family could easily make a move against the Zhang family, but against Jiang Taoran, an inspector of the Guanzhong torture room, he did not dare to make a move. Many warriors were watching in front of the Luo family's shop. Almost all of them were sent by some local martial arts forces in the Quanzhou prefecture. They had long been aware of the Luo family's actions, but they did not act rashly. Instead, they enticed the Zhang family, who were the first to lose their cool, to make a move. They wanted to see what the Luo family's confidence was, and what Chu Xiao's intentions were. Now that Jiang Taoran was here, the matter would soon be resolved. The Luo clan's patriarch chuckled as he personally went out to welcome Jiang Chen. He cupped his fists and said, "Why didn't you inform me in advance that Lord Jiang was coming? I apologize for not going out to meet you." Jiang Taoran waved his hand and said coldly, "Don't talk nonsense with me. What does Chu Xiao mean by extending his hand so far?" Of course, the Luo family patriarch wouldn't say that it was Chu Xiao's idea in public. He just smiled and said, "I'm afraid Lord Jiang has misunderstood. This has nothing to do with official Chu. Can't the Luo family do business elsewhere?" Jiang Taoran sneered and said, Fine. You won't say anything, right? All right, I'll ask Chu Xiao to personally come to the Quanzhou prefecture to ask for him." As he spoke, Jiang Taoran directly barked, "Seal all the Luo clan's shops for me. I suspect that the Luo family is involved in the smuggling of contraband goods. Seize them immediately." At this moment, Tangya leisurely sauntered out from inside and said lightly, "Who said that the Luo family smuggled contraband goods? I've just finished investigating, and it's pure nonsense." Jiang Taoran narrowed his eyes as he looked at Tangya. He recognized Tangya. This person was one of Chu Xiao's trusted subordinates. In the past, he was also an assassin from the Blue Dragon Society. "The Zhenzhou constable came to my Quanzhou prefecture to meddle in other people's business. Does Chu Xiu not care about the rules? This is simply nonsense. Tanya said unhurriedly, "There's something I forgot to tell you, Lord Jiang. My lord has already been promoted to a 7th grade secret agent by Hall Master. I'm not here as a Zhenzhou constable from the Zhenzhou Prefecture's patrol hall. I've received orders from official Chu of the Zhenzhou Prefecture's patrol hall. There's a big difference between the two. According to my investigation, there's nothing wrong with the Luo family. On the contrary, I suspect that the Zhang family might be involved in the smuggling of contraband goods. Therefore, I hope that Lord Jiang can assist in the investigation and not obstruct me." As soon as this was said, Jiang Taoran's face instantly darkened. He hadn't told anyone that Chu Xiu had actually become a secret agent of the Zhenzhou Prefecture's arrest hall. However, this matter was reasonable. After all, Chu Xiu had gained face for the Guanzhong torture room and made such a great contribution. Hall Master Guan wasn't as short-sighted as Wei Zhouduan. He would definitely give Chu Xiu a reward that he deserved. Therefore, Tanya wouldn't lie to him about this matter. Tanya had said this in front of everyone. If he lied, Chu Xiu would also be in trouble. However, the thorny problem now was Chu Xiu's identity. In terms of the Guanzhong torture room system, the arrest hall was half a level higher than the patrol hall and torture hall branches of the various regions. It had always been the various torture hall branches cooperating with the arrest hall to investigate certain matters. The arrest hall had never cooperated with other people's investigations. Right now, Chu Xiu was using the tiger skin as a flag. Tanya was his subordinate, but he was using his identity as a member of the arrest hall to make a fuss. Although this was just a game of words, it was in accordance with the Guanzhong torture room's rules. At this time, one of Jiang Taoran's subordinates didn't understand the situation. Everyone else was keeping a low profile as they watched the situation unfold. Only he stood out to show his loyalty. He shouted at Tanya, "How dare you? How dare you speak to Lord Jiang like this? You don't know your place." As he spoke, the physical invulnerability realm martial artist actually rushed towards Tanya, wanting to take him down to apologize to Jiang Taoran. Seeing this scene, Jiang Taoran secretly cursed him for being an idiot. Since they hadn't made a move yet, there was still room for negotiation with Chu Xiu. But once they made a move, he would definitely have to face off against Chu Xiu. Looking at the martial artist rushing towards him, the corner of Tanya's mouth curled into a disdainful sneer. After resting for such a long time, in the end, this kind of trash came to give him some exercise? It really was a little unpleasant. In the instant that the martial artist rushed forward with his sword, Tanya's figure moved. His body was like an arrow released from a bow, and in the blink of an eye, he had already appeared in front of the martial artist. 2 slender daggers appeared in his hands, and he slashed them down. The sharp blade aura directly shattered the martial artist's protective chi, causing him to hurriedly withdraw his sword in defense. But at this moment, a golden light flashed in Tanya's hand. A slender dragon tail soul hunting dart, under the control of Tanya's gang energy, had actually shot towards the martial artist's back. Being attacked from both front and back, the martial artist could only forcefully activate all the gang energy in his body to block the dragon tail soul hunting dart behind him. However, he was directly sent flying by Tanya's twin daggers, and he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. "Impudent!" Jiang Taoran roared angrily, and directly slammed his palm towards Tanya. The palm force was incomparably vigorous, and the surrounding gang energy actually had a faint suction force. Tanya's figure actually involuntarily crashed towards Jiang Taoran. Originally, Jiang Taoran didn't want to make a move, but that idiot attacked without permission, messing up Jiang Taoran's plan. Even if that martial artist was an idiot, he was still his subordinate. But now, in front of everyone, he was beaten by Tanya to the point of vomiting blood in a few moves. If he didn't make a move, where would he put his face? At this time, seeing Jiang Taoran make a move, there was no fear in Tanya's eyes, and there was even a faint hint of excitement. Assassins from the Blue Dragon Society were all elites among those of the same level. When Tanya was in the physical invulnerability realm, there was almost no one in the same level who could match him. When carrying out a mission, it was very common for him to fight one against many. Of course, it was only a few people, and it was not abnormal like Chu Xiu, who could fight 1 against 100. However, Tanya had never fought against a martial artist in the Three-Flower realm, and now he wanted to give it a try. Facing Jiang Taoran's palm, more than 10 golden lights flashed around Tanya's body, and at the same time, more than 10 dragon-tail soul-hunting darts shot out. However, strangely, they didn't shoot straight towards Jiang Taoran. Instead, they flew all over the sky with the support of gang energy, like a large net, piercing towards Jiang Taoran's major acupoints. Jiang Taoran coldly snorted. After all, he was a martial artist in the three-flower realm, and the density of his gang energy was far beyond Tang Ya's imagination. As he slapped with both palms, he directly blasted away all of Tang Ya's dragon-tail soul-hunting dart with his own powerful gang energy. However, at this time, Tang Ya's figure fluttered like willow catkins. It was very strange. As his figure danced, countless silver needles scattered around him, like pear blossoms in a storm. There was no end to them. Jiang Taoran was also shocked by this scene. Could it be that this person was carrying some kind of hidden weapon with him? If he shot out so many hidden weapons with gang energy, just how terrifying was this person's control of gang energy? All of you break! Jiang Taoran roared angrily. He put his palms together and slowly pushed them out. It seemed clumsy, but his gang energy was as indestructible as a mountain. Although the silver needles were densely packed, they were all bounced away wherever he passed. However, at this moment, a dazzling golden light bloomed in Tang Ya's hands. The hilts of the two short knives in his hands connected, forming something like a moon. It shone with an incomparable sharpness as it slashed toward Jiang Taoran. It was an extremely sharp force without any impurities. It was a sharp force formed by condensing and compressing gang energy to the extreme. Someone had once told Tang Ya that the path of hidden weapons took a strange path. However, those who were able to cultivate this path to great success would be able to interweave the truth and strangeness. They would be upright and aboveboard. When a hidden weapon was shot out, the opponent could only take it head-on. Just like this saber strike of his, Tang Ya had practically treated himself as a hidden weapon and blasted it out. Even Jiang Taoran was shocked by the sharpness of that moment. He immediately erupted all his gang energy. His hand formed a fist seal, and the gang energy in front of him instantly became incomparably viscous. Tang Ya's knife was placed horizontally in the middle, stagnant, but it was already less than a foot away from Jiang Taoran. With a loud bang, Jiang Taoran's gang energy was shattered. Tang Ya's two short knives were directly blasted away. His figure also rapidly retreated, his face slightly pale. Jiang Taoran, who stood opposite him, although his expression was normal, was extremely gloomy. Just now, he had used all his strength to block Tang Ya's knife. If he had relaxed even a little, it was very likely that he would have been injured just now. In terms of status and strength, Tang Ya was a junior, but in the end, he did not gain the slightest advantage in the hands of this junior. What kind of monsters were Chu Xiu's subordinates? Good. Very good. Chu Xiu has broken the rules. I won't talk nonsense with a junior like you. When the time comes, I will personally find Chu Xiu and explain it to him. After saying that, Jiang Taoran directly led his people away. Behind him, Tang Ya revealed a trace of a smile, but that smile was filled with disdain. Chapter 269. Jiang Taoran returned in defeat from the Chen state government. The same thing happened in the other state governments. The sects and aristocratic families of the Zhenzhou government and Chu Xiu subordinates acted to deal with the local martial arts factions. As long as the local inspectors came out to stop them, Chu Xiu subordinates would bring up the identity of a member of the criminal division. It had to be said that Chu Xiu's identity as a member of the criminal investigations division was quite useful, at least in terms of the rules. Although everyone knew that Chu Xiu was deliberately looking for trouble by extending his reach so far, this was still in line with the rules. Therefore, after such a thing happened, Jiang Taoran sent a message to the other inspectors, preparing to discuss this matter. In the meeting hall of the Chen state government, Fang Hua, Situ Xing, Jiang Taoran, Wei Chongling and Yang Ling gathered. Situ Xing snorted. Lawless. This was simply lawless. Who does Chu Xiu think he is? Does he really think that just because he has some fame outside and made some contributions to the hall chief, he can be unbridled? Situ Xing and Fang Hua were the angriest. In terms of strength, they were at the 5 energies returning to the origin realm and were stronger than Chu Xiu. In terms of experience, they were veterans of the Guanzhong torture room and had been in Guanxi longer than Wei Zhouduan. Previously, Chu Xiu had made these contributions for the Guanzhong torture room and they had been very polite to Chu Xiu. But they had not expected Chu Xiu to take advantage of them and stretch his hand so far that it was already at their doorstep. Wei Chongling sat at the side and sneered. Chu Xiu is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant, a very impetuous person. Right now, he is just an inspector and is so arrogant after making some contributions. When his foundation in Guanxi deepens, I fear that he will be riding on our necks. At this time, Wei Chongling was very happy. Last time, he had been humiliated by Chu Xiu in front of the Guanxi branch. None of these people had stood up to help him. They had all silently watched the show. But now, Chu Xiu is also bullying you. This time, I want to see what you can do. Zhang Taoran snorted and said, now that Chu Xiu has already done it, what's the use of scolding him here? Most importantly, he has the identity of a member of the criminal division. If we make a move on him, we'll be seen as breaking the rules. At this point, Zhang Taoran and the others felt aggrieved. It was Chu Xiu who had broken the rules and stretched his hand so far. In the end, they couldn't do anything about it. Sometimes, the rules of the Guanzhong torture room were something that even the inspectors could not help but criticize in their hearts. They were all from the Guanzhong torture room, and their strength was the same. Why was the status of the narcotics department higher than theirs by half a rank? Their treatment was also better? Of course, they had neglected one point. The narcotics department was involved in the business of killing people, while they were only responsible for stabilizing the forces in their respective jurisdictions. At this time, Feng Hua suddenly turned his gaze to Yang Ling, who had not spoken, and said, Yang Ling, now you and I are both inspectors. What Chu Xiu did is also our interests. You are Wei Daren's adopted son. Why don't you report this matter to Wei Daren and let him punish Chu Xiu? Hearing this, Yang Ling sneered in his heart. Feng Hua, this old fellow, really thought that he was an idiot. He wanted him to be the first to act? Not to mention that he would not report this matter to Wei Zhouduan. Yang Ling would record every word they said here today and have someone send it to Chu Xiu. Facing everyone's gaze, Yang Ling spread his hands helplessly and said, Everyone, don't look at me like this. Don't you know Yifu's character? If Chu Xiu touches Yifu's interests, then Yifu will take care of it. But now, this is an internal matter of us inspectors. Do you think Yifu will stand on our side? Also, Chu Xiu has just gained face for our Guanzhong torture room in Jianghu. He can be said to have come with great momentum. Even Yifu is not willing to offend Chu Xiu right now. You all saw what happened to Wei Daren at the gates of the torture hall branch a few days ago. Did Yifu act? He did not even show his face. I do not want to touch Yifu's bad luck. If you want to go, then go. In any case, I will not go. As he spoke, Yang Ling spread his hands and put on an expression of a dead pig not afraid of boiling water. On the other side, Wei Chongling's face darkened. The most embarrassing thing in his life was being humiliated by Chu Xiu in front of everyone. But now, Yang Ling mentioned it again in front of him. Feng Hua frowned and said, This won't do and that won't do. Are we just going to let Chu Xiu touch our interests? At the side, Zhang Taoren gritted his teeth and said, Of course not. Even Wei Zhouduan has to follow the rules. What right does Chu Xiu have to do? Let's all go to the Zhenzhou government together. At worst, we will make a big fuss. I want to see if Wei Daren will care after this matter is made big. Everyone present nodded. Now that things had come to this, they could only do this. Yang Ling also nodded his head, but there was a trace of mysteriousness in his eyes. After everyone had dispersed, he immediately wrote down everything that everyone had said and arranged for people to quickly send it to the Zhenzhou government. Not mentioning that Chu Xiu still had a handle on him, he now understood that following Chu Xiu would definitely have a better future than Wei Zhouduan. Wei Zhouduan was already old. After he retired, the tea would cool after he left. How many benefits could he give him? On the other hand, Chu Xiu was like the sun in the sky right now. The Guanzhong torture room looked at ability and qualifications, but the most important thing was still strength. Right now, Chu Xiu was already in the top 10 of the Longhu roll. How far could Chu Xiu go in the future? In any case, from Yang Ling's point of view, Chu Xiu's future achievements would definitely far surpass Wei Zhouduan and everyone present. Since that was the case, he would definitely stand on Chu Xiu's side wholeheartedly. What was the point of messing around with this group of short-sighted people? In the Zhenzhou government, Chu Xiu immediately received the news from Yang Ling. He smiled and directly crushed the secret letter with his true chi. He could almost guess the reaction of these people. Although they were all angry, they did not want to fall out with him. Since that was the case, it would be much easier to handle. The next day, Jiang Taoran and the other 4 people came to the door aggressively, causing the Jianghu constables who were guarding the door of the Zhenzhou government to shiver. Chu Xiu laughed and walked out, saying, "You guys are so busy. How do you have the time to stroll around my Zhenzhou government today?" Jiang Taoran said coldly, "Chu Xiu, don't you know why we are here? You have reached so far. This time you have broken the rules of our Guanxi region." Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, Master Jiang. Come in and talk. Standing at the door and letting people watch is beneath your dignity." When Jiang Taoran and the others saw Chu Xiu's indifferent appearance as if nothing had happened, they were also angry in their hearts. However, they did not want to fall out with Chu Xiu here, so they did not say much. After inviting everyone into a meeting hall, Chu Xiu slowly asked his men to serve tea. After taking a sip of tea, he said slowly, "You guys are angry because I asked the aristocratic families of the Zhenzhou government to steal business from other state capitals?" Feng Hua snorted and said, "You still know? Chu Xiu, from the time you entered the Guanxi region, I have not provoked you. But now, you have reached so far and touched our interests. What do you mean by this? Do you really think you can be lawless because you made a contribution to the Guanzhong torture room and left an impression on the hall chief?" Chu Xiu glanced at Wei Chongling and said coolly, "I do not mean that. But official Feng, you should know that nothing in this world is absolutely fair. You also said that I, Chu Xiu, fought outside and made meritorious service for the Guanzhong torture hall. But in the end, someone stole what should have belonged to me. Tell me, who should I go to seek justice?" Wei Chongling's expression darkened. Chu Xiu's words were clearly directed at him. Wei Chongling snorted coldly and slapped the table. "Chu Xiu. It was official Wei's order to appoint me as the inspector. If you do not accept it, go reason with official Wei. Why are you pointing at me in such a strange way?" Chu Xiu looked coldly at Wei Chongling. His eyes were like deep pools. In a flash, the power of the soul-moving art was unleashed and pulled in Wei Chongling's mental power. With Wei Chongling's present strength, he could not stop Chu Xiu's soul-moving art. In his mind, countless ghosts leapt at him and tore at his body. The pain was so real that Wei Chongling grunted and broke out in a cold sweat. Right now, Jiang Taoran and the others were working together to threaten Chu Xiu. They could not watch as Chu Xiu was so arrogant. The strongest, Feng Hua and Situ Xing, released their powerful energies and shouted at Chu Xiu, "Chu Xiu, what do you want to do? If you want to fight, we will keep you company." Their energies exploded. If Chu Xiu did not stop, the two of them would definitely stop him. Seeing the two interfere, Chu Xiu withdrew his soul-moving art. But Wei Chongling seemed to have been fished out of the water. His head was covered in cold sweat and his gaze at Chu Xiu was filled with terror. Last time, when he had vomited blood from Chu Xiu's great Vajra wheel seal, he knew he was not a match for Chu Xiu. In a head-on fight, he would not be able to block a few moves from Chu Xiu. Now, he knew he had overestimated himself last time. In a head-on fight, he could not even block one move from Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu slowly picked up a teacup and took a sip before saying, "I do not want to fight. I just want to teach this idiot a lesson. Tell him what is reverence. Do not think that just because you and I are inspectors, you qualify to be on equal footing with me. Back at the God Weapon Conference, I killed more than 1 or 2 3 Flower Realm martial practitioners. With your strength, you dare to slap the table and shout at me. Are you worthy?" Chapter 270. Chu Xiu's sudden attack caused Feng Hua and Situ Xing's eyes to be filled with a look of fear. On one hand, they were afraid of Chu Xiu's arrogant and temperamental attitude. At the same time, they were also afraid of Chu Xiu's strength. The two of them were veteran practitioners of the 5 Qis unifying to the origin realm. Having stayed in the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall for such a long time, they had accumulated some experience. However, Chu Xiu's mysterious great technique of extinguishing the heavens and destroying the earth and soul-shifting had left a deep impression on them. The moment they saw Chu Xiu's attack, they wondered if they could block Chu Xiu's move if they were in his place. Both Situ Xing and Feng Hua were somewhat uncertain about this. In the past, Situ Xing and Feng Hua didn't have any understanding of the top 10 martial artists on the Longhu list. After all, they rarely came out of their seclusion. But now, they could be considered to have seen it for themselves. For an existence at the level of Chu Xiao, it didn't seem difficult to kill someone at a higher level. In particular, the gap between the 3-flower realm and the 5 Qis toward the origin stage wasn't that big. At least, it was much smaller than the gap between the physical invulnerability stage and the 3-flower realm. At this time, Yang Ling stood up to smooth things over and said, "Everyone, we're all here to discuss things. Why do you have to be so hostile? It's not good for anyone, isn't it?" Hearing Yang Ling's words, Feng Hua and Situ Xing seemed to have found a way out. They snorted coldly and sat back down. Jiang Taoren seemed to have been shocked by Chu Xiao's attack just now. His tone softened a little as he said, "Lord Chu, just like what Yang Ling said just now, we came here with the attitude of discussing things. What exactly do you intend to do this time? Although you haven't been in the Guanxi area for long, you should know the rules here. What you're doing now is obviously breaking the rules. I'm afraid it's a little inappropriate to oppose us for a little profit." Chu Xiao waved his hand and said, "Everyone, you keep saying that I've affected your interests. In that case, I'd like to ask, how much did the martial arts influences under your jurisdiction give you? Was it as much as my Zhenzhou prefecture?" Everyone present looked at each other. Jiang Taoran said a little awkwardly, "Well, of course not. After all, we don't have official Chu's means." Currently, in the entire Guanxi region, apart from the prefectures under Chu Xiao who completely obeyed his orders and the martial arts factions under him who did not dare to be disloyal, the other martial arts factions in the prefectures actually appeared to be in harmony with the local patrol hall. To put it simply, they would give a certain amount of filial piety to the inspector hall every month. At the same time, the inspector hall had to turn a blind eye to their smuggling of contraband. Sometimes, they even had to provide some convenience for them. In general, as long as these inspectors were not as stubborn as Chu Xiao's predecessor, Fang Zhengyuan, they were living a good life. Of course, they couldn't be compared with Chu Xiao. Chu Xiao had directly received a share of the profits from the local martial arts influences in Zhenzhou Prefecture. In Zhenzhou Prefecture, his words were absolute. This made the other patrol envoys very jealous. Chu Xiao said in a deep voice, "Everyone, I have indeed interfered in the affairs of other prefectures. However, I did not interfere in the affairs of your patrol hall. Instead, I interfered in the business of the local pugilistic world. You said that I took away your profits, but what if I can guarantee that you get more profits?" Jiang Taoren frowned and said, "What do you mean?" Chu Xiao said lightly, "What I mean is very simple. You don't have to accept the filial piety of the local martial arts forces in the state governments under your command. Just pretend that you can't do anything to me. As long as you don't intervene, those martial arts forces will be at my mercy. Of course, I wouldn't go overboard. Whatever I did in the Zhenzhou Prefecture, they would do the same over there. Similarly, they would have to give me a portion of their respective smuggling businesses. As for the part they give me, I won't take it for myself. We'll split it evenly." Chu Xiao pointed to himself and said, "I'll take 60%, and you take 40%. Jiang Taoran's eyes widened when he heard that. How could he do that? In fact, Chu Xiao's move was very simple. Didn't these local martial arts forces think that Chu Xiao couldn't do anything to them because of the rules of Guanxi? Well, let the inspectors behind them admit defeat first and take the lead. In this way, how many people would have the guts to be stubborn? This was like a story from Chu Xiao's previous life. When a local official wanted to collect taxes, he would first join forces with the local gentry. Only when the gentry paid the taxes honestly would the other people follow suit. After that, the gentry would return the money in full. The money of the people would be divided 30% to 70%. The gentry would get 70%, and the local official would get 30%. Of course, when it came to Chu Xiao, the rules had to be changed. He would get the bigger share, and the others would get the smaller share. However, Chu Xiao was quite kind. He would get 60%, and the others would get 40%. However, even this 40% was more than what the martial arts forces had given them in the past. Looking at the people present, Chu Xiao said in a deep voice, "Everyone, you said that I've affected your interests. Now, not only have I not affected your interests, but I can also increase your interests. You don't want to fall out, and I don't want to either. So I have put the solution in front of you. Tell me, do you agree or not? The people present had conflicted expressions. Of course, Wei Chongling would never agree. His identity as the Guanxi inspector was secondary. His main identity was a member of the Zhou Wei family. He had to consider the interests of the Zhou Wei family first. But just now, he had experienced Chu Xiu's power, so he did not dare to speak now. Jiang Taoran and the others had thoughtful expressions. While Chu Xiu's words sounded nice and they would receive more benefits than before, it was not as if they did not pay anything. According to Chu Xiu, the price they had to pay was very simple, and that was prestige. By doing so, it was equivalent to them taking the initiative to admit defeat in front of Chu Xiu, and no longer caring about the local martial arts forces. In this way, Chu Xiu's power in the Guanxi region would definitely increase greatly, but their reputation in the local martial arts forces would at least be below Chu Xiu's. If they did not agree, they would have to fall out with Chu Xiu. If they agreed, while they could gain benefits, they would also lose a part of their reputation. This was really a difficult choice. But at this moment, Yang Ling suddenly stood up and said, I agree to official Chu's conditions. Jiang Taoran and the rest looked at Yang Ling with surprise on their faces. There was also some anger on their faces. Before they came, everyone had agreed that they would advance and retreat together. But now, Yang Ling suddenly changed his mind and was the first to agree. What did he mean? Facing everyone's gaze, Yang Ling smiled bitterly and said, Everyone, it has been a long time since we joined the Guanzhong torture room. All these years, even if we don't have any merits, we have worked hard. However, everyone knows about the salary of the torture chamber. It is really a little pitiful. So to be honest, as inspectors, we must definitely put money first. You are not afraid, but I am still in the physical invulnerability realm. If I don't prepare more resources, how will I break through to the three-flower realm? You all know my godfather's character. I won't be able to get any cultivation resources from him, so now I can only think of a way. Official Chu is the #1 person in the younger generation of the Guanzhong torture room. He also represents the Guanzhong torture room in the martial arts world. He is now ranked 6th in Longhu. It is not embarrassing to admit defeat in front of such a person. I, Yang Ling, don't care about a little reputation. The key is to get the benefits first. So, everyone, I'm sorry. Regardless of whether you agree or not, I am ready to agree. Yang Ling's words also made Jiang Taoran and the others fall into deep thought. Just as Yang Ling said, while they were still in the Guanzhong torture room plotting for a little profit, Chu Xiu had already made a name for himself in the martial arts world. Moreover, with Chu Xiu's current age and strength, it was certain that he would be in a high position in the future. At the very least, his progress would be much faster than theirs. At that time, they might still be inspectors, but Chu Xiu would already be a torture officer or the head of the criminal division. With benefits in front of them, why should they offend Chu Xiu for a little worthless reputation? After thinking it through, Jiang Taoran gritted his teeth and said, Official Chu, I am also willing to agree to your conditions. Anyway, he admitted that he was not as good as Chu Xiu. Moreover, the benefits that Chu Xiu gave him did not make him suffer a loss. Therefore, Jiang Taoran also smoothly agreed. Seeing that 2 of the 5 people had already agreed, Fang Hua and Situ Xing looked at each other and sighed. We also agree to official Chu's conditions. Fang Hua and Situ Xing's age was not considered old, but they were not considered young either. They had already passed the prime of their life. In this lifetime, they should not be able to step into the realm of the unity of man and nature. As long as Chu Xiu did not die and did not die prematurely, it was almost certain that he would step into the realm of the unity of man and nature in the future. Although they were not considered old now, in front of people like Chu Xiu, they were already considered old. Since Jiang Taoran and Yang Ling had already agreed, what else could they insist on? They did not want to save up a lot of money, but in the end, they would not have the life to spend it. Just like their colleague, Kai Jingsheng, who had been running around for most of his life. When he was young, he was even more desperate. He even joined the criminal division as a secret agent for a period of time. What was the result? In the end, he still ended up with a serious injury. In the end, he sold off all the money he had accumulated over the years to find the divine doctor of the Jianghu, Anger Yama Feng Buping, to treat him. Seeing 4 of the 5 people agree, Wei Chongling was dumbfounded. What was he supposed to say? But Chu Xiu did not intend to waste words with Wei Chongling. He said coldly, Wei Chongling, you do not need to agree or disagree. You can choose to spread what I said today to other Zhonghu forces. This is all up to you. But at that time, you will be touching the interests of the entire Guanxi branch. I fear that I do not need to act. The people present will make sure that you have no place in the Guanxi branch. Chapter 271. With Yang Ling as a spy, Chu Xiu's words caused the other inspectors present to stand on his side. Chu Xiu wanted authority in the Guanxi region, while the others wanted benefits. There was no conflict between the two. The only one who had a conflict with him was Wei Chongling. But now that the situation was set, Wei Chongling could not cause any trouble. Everyone present looked towards Wei Chongling. The pressure made Wei Chongling not dare to say anything, or even retort. Wei Chongling glared hatefully at the people present. In the end he could only say, all right, since you have decided, do not regret it. Finishing, Wei Chongling turned and left. The arm could not twist the thigh. This matter was not something he could control. If Chu Xiu wanted to dominate Guanxi, the Nine Plains Wei family would be the first to not agree. Chu Xiu looked at the people present and said with a smile, just a small trouble. Everyone, do not worry. Do not worry, as long as you pretend to be deaf and dumb during this time, and do not care about the affairs of your prefectures, a month later, you will receive more things. Feng Hua and the others helplessly nodded their heads. Since they have already agreed to Chu Xiu's conditions, they naturally don't need to think too much about it. After the discussion, everyone directly bid farewell and left. On the surface, Yang Ling wanted to return to his Shangzhou government, but after a round, he returned to the Zhenzhou government's hall. Congratulations. Official. If this matter succeeds, in the future, you will be the most powerful inspector in Guanxi after Wei Zhuduan, Yang Ling said respectfully to Chu Xiu. In front of other people, he was an inspector on equal footing with Chu Xiu, but in front of Chu Xiu, he did not forget his identity. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, there is still the last hurdle. It is not so easy. Just watch, some people are fated to cause trouble. Yang Ling said hesitantly, you mean Wei Chongling? Do you need us to deal with him in secret? Killing a colleague without permission was a taboo in the Guanzhong torture room. But Chu Xiu had already done such a thing more than once. Even Yang Ling was a little used to it, so it was not a big deal to do it again. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, Wei Chongling is just a minor character. If we kill Wei Chongling, the Nine Plains Wei family can push out another Wei Chongling. Yang Ling frowned and said, then does Sir mean to directly attack the Nine Plains Wei family? Chu Xiu said indifferently, that day will come. However, it is not now. Now, we will have to see what attitude that foster father of yours has. Hearing that, Yang Ling could not help but reveal a disdainful smile. He had served his foster father for so many years. How could he not know his character? He had really been blind back then. He had really thought that he had managed to latch onto Wei Zhuduan's thigh. In the end, it was a thigh that was completely stingy. After Wei Chongling left the Zhenzhou government, he did not return to his own government, but headed straight for the Nine Plains Wei family. The Nine Plains Wei family was in the Nine Plains government at the border of Guangdong and Guanxi. However, it was not in the government, but outside the government, in a sizable manner. The patriarch of the Wei family had the power of the five energies towards Yuan, comparable to an inspector like Feng Hua, and more than one. The one who truly gave the Wei family such a status was the Wei family's ancestor. He was a great expert who was one with the world, but he was not young. It was said that he was of the same generation as Wei Zhuduan, but he had long since stopped fighting. He only stayed in the Wei family to cultivate his character and intimidate the small fries. At this time, Wei Chongling returned directly to the Wei family. The Wei family disciples who came and went did not have very respectful expressions when they saw him. The Wei family was a large family in Guangzhou. At their peak, the family had even produced martial grandmasters. But later on, they declined slightly. So the Wei family did not fear the Guangzhou torture room like the other martial sects in Guangzhou. They could not bear to throw their direct disciples into the Guangzhou torture room. Wei Chongling was a branch disciple, but he was one of the more outstanding of the branch disciples. Walking to the door of the Wei family residence, Wei Chongling bowed and said, Wei Chongling requests an audience with the patriarch. The Wei family disciple guarding the door reported and then led Wei Chongling in. The patriarch of the Wei family, Wei Mok, was a middle-aged man with scholarly features. However, he had a dignified expression and was much more imposing than forefather Luo and the others. This was the foundation of the Wei family. While the Wei family had declined, they still had the rules of a large family. What is it? But what trouble did Chu Xiu cause? Didn't I tell you last time that Chu Xiu is in the limelight right now? Do not provoke him for now. The higher you stand, the worse you will fall. We only need to watch quietly. Watch him rise. Watch his building collapse. That is enough. Wei Mok spoke unhurriedly with a carefree look on his face. In these years, there had been inspectors and even a few torture officers who had wanted to make trouble for the Wei family. The result? The inspectors flowed like water. The Wei family made of iron. The Wei family had established themselves in Guangzhou, even earlier than the history of the Guangzhou torture room. Those inspectors and torture officers had disappeared long ago. The Wei family still stood here. It could be said that from the beginning, the Wei family did not think much of Chu Xiu. Wei Chongling said with grief and indignation, "Family master, this time, I did not provoke Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu is ambitious and wants to swallow all the businesses in Guanxi. This is destroying the foundation of the Wei family." The smuggling business was so large that the Wei family had naturally done it before. When Wei Chongling recounted everything to Wei Mok in detail, Wei Mok's face darkened and he faintly felt anger. The Wei family had been in Guangzhou for so long but had never seen such an arrogant inspector. Wei Mok waved his hand and said, "All right, you do not need to worry about this matter. I will handle it personally." Wei Chongling sighed in relief and left. After sending Wei Chongling away, Wei Mok went to the backyard of the Wei family. While this was only a yard, it was half the size of the Wei family. There were all kinds of spirit flowers and herbs planted here, and the spirit energy was dense. At this time, in the center of the backyard, an old man dressed in white robes was meditating on a meditation mat. His aura was restrained to the extreme, as though he was a dead person. When Wei Mok walked in, the old man opened his eyes. A sharp light shone out and he said coolly, "Did something major happen outside?" This old man was the forefather of the Wei family. He had been cultivating here for more than a decade, but in terms of spirit, he was better than Wei Zhouduan. Once a martial artist reached an old age, it was inevitable that their vitality would decline. This was why the forefather of the Wei family had chosen to delegate most of the family's matters and then go into seclusion to study Taoist scriptures. He cultivated and nurtured his mind in order to slow down his aging. Needless to say, this method was somewhat useful. At the very least, the forefather of the Wei family looked better than Wei Zhouduan. After all, while Wei Zhouduan's position as the penal officer was relatively easy, he still had to worry about all kinds of matters and schemes every day. His effort consumption was definitely greater than that of the forefather of the Wei family. Wei Mok said, "Something happened." As he said that, Wei Mok told the forefather of the Wei family what had happened. In the end, Wei Mok said, "This matter is tricky because the other party is Chu Xiu. He is the Chu Xiu who made great contributions to the Guangzhou torture room. If it was an ordinary patrol inspector, it wouldn't be a problem for us to get rid of him secretly. But now that it's Chu Xiu, we can't act blindly without thinking." The forefather of the Wei family pondered for a moment and suddenly said, "Blow up the matter." Wei Mok was stunned. He then asked, "Blow up the matter?" The forefather of the Wei family said in a deep voice, "Go to the Yuan continent's Zhang family. The two of us will take action together and blow up the matter to the extent that Wei Zhouduan has no choice but to come out and suppress it. But remember to act appropriately. If we cripple or kill Chu Xiu, our Wei family will also be out of luck." Although Wei Zhouduan is old and looks useless now, he is still a torture officer. Before he retires, he doesn't want to make a big fuss. If he doesn't care about this matter, who will? Remember, it's best to let the people from the Guangzhou torture room deal with the people from the Guangzhou torture room themselves. This is also the reason why I want you to stuff the disciples of the Wei family into the Guangzhou torture room. Wei Mok quickly said, "Yes, I will do it now." The forefather was indeed the forefather. He immediately pointed out the crux of the matter. Although the forefather of the Wei family wasn't from the Guangzhou torture room, his understanding of the Guangzhou torture room was probably deeper than some of the martial artists from the Guangzhou torture room. So after leaving, Wei Mok directly brought his men to the Yuan continent's Zhang family. He was prepared to join forces with the Zhang family to stir up some trouble. There were countless sects and aristocratic families in the land of Guanxi. However, other than the Wei family, only the Yuan continent's Zhang family could be considered as a big family. Among them, the forefather of the Zhang family was also a great expert in the realm of oneness of heaven and man. In the past, the Wei family and the Zhang family also had some grudges and friction. However, both sides knew that in the land of Guanzhong, the Guanzhong torture room dominated. If they didn't join forces, it was estimated that every torture officer would cut off their flesh. So it was common for the two families to cooperate. After arriving at the Zhang family, Wei Mok stated his intention. The head of the Zhang family, Zhang Kunz, was a tall and burly man with a face full of curly beard. He looked more like a bandit than the head of an aristocratic family. He said, "Since the forefather of the Wei family has spoken, I will personally accompany you. To be honest, I really want to see what kind of person Chu Xiao is. In just a few years, he was able to make such a name for himself in the pugilistic world. I hope he isn't the kind of person who deceives the world to gain fame." Chapter 272. Before the Wei family and Zhang family made their move, the other small powers in the Guanxi region were actually watching. The inspectors from all over the Guanxi region had taken the initiative to admit defeat in front of Chu Xiao. Although this made the small powers angry, they could not do anything about it. However, just because they were helpless didn't mean that the famous Wei clan and Zhang clan in the Guanxi region were also helpless. With the strength of these two families, they were even qualified to talk to Wei Zhouduan on equal footing, let alone Chu Xiao. At this moment, Du Guangzhong nervously knocked on the door of Chu Xiao's study in the Zhenzhou Prefecture's Inspector Hall. He said somewhat anxiously, "Sir, the Zhang family and the Wei family have made a move together. Their family heads have personally made a move and caused a huge commotion. They are preparing to come to the Zhenzhou Prefecture to demand an explanation from you." Chu Xiao raised his eyebrows and said, "You are saying that they are making a huge commotion?" Du Guangzhong nodded and said, "It is. Almost everyone in the Guanxi region knows about it." An unfathomable smile appeared on Chu Xiao's face. He said, "All right, you don't have to worry about this matter. We will deal with it when it comes. These two families will not be able to stir up any waves." Du Guangzhong was a little confused. They were already coming, so how could they not be able to stir up any waves? Chu Xiao could guess what the Wei family and Zhang family were thinking. If these two families really wanted to deal with Chu Xiao because Chu Xiao had touched their reverse scale, why would they be so high profile and say that they would cause trouble for him? A dog that bites will not bark. It was just like how the Zhang family had plotted to kill the previous inspector, Fang Zhengyuan. At that time, no one had realized that the Zhang family was going to make a move against Fang Zhengyuan. In the end, the Zhang family had made a move and killed Fang Zhengyuan. No one could find any evidence. This time, the Wei family and the Zhang family were so high profile. They were probably not here for him, but to put some pressure on Wei Zhouduan. However, they didn't expect that the current Chu Xiao wasn't someone that Wei Zhouduan could easily deal with. On the second day, the experts of the Wei family and the Zhang family had already arrived at the Zhenzhou Prefecture. At this time, in front of the Zhenzhou Prefecture Hall, hundreds of warriors with the weakest Xiantian strength had surrounded the entire Zhenzhou Prefecture Hall. This made the constables of the Zhenzhou Prefecture Hall look as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Du Guangzhong stood in front of the door and shouted at the Wei and Zhang families, "What do you want? This is the patrol hall of the Guangzhong torture room. Are you trying to challenge the laws of the Guangzhong torture room by doing this?" Wei Mok said indifferently, "You can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. We're only here to seek justice from official Chu. It has nothing to do with the Guangzhong torture room." Zhang Kunz, who was standing beside Wei Mok, said coldly, "Go get the adults from your family. You don't have the right to speak here." Although the Zhang family of Yuan continent wasn't as famous as the Wei family of Nine Plains, the Zhang family was obviously superior in terms of the strength of their disciples. Zhang Kunz's character was also very domineering and direct. "So what if I'm here? Do you dare to attack the Guangzhong torture room directly?" Chu Xiao stepped out of the patrol hall. His aura didn't seem to be at a disadvantage when facing the Wei family and the Zhang family. The Wei family of 9 plains and the Zhang family of Yuan continent were indeed famous in Guanxi. But what were they in the Jianghu? The realm determined the height of a person. Back at the God Weapon Conference, who was the person who befriended and secretly allied with Chu Xiu? It was the personal disciple of the World Society's Chen Qingdi. It was the elite disciple of the Mo family of Shangyang and the Luo family of Wu County of the 9 major clans. Even if Chu Xiu's enemies were the disciples of the Azure Watersword sect and the Nansong Xiahou clan, Chu Xiu's status was equal to theirs. A small family that could only dominate the Guanxi region. Why would Chu Xiu care about them now? Wei Mok and Zhang Kunz frowned when they saw Chu Xiu. Hearing about him was not as good as meeting him in person. They only realized that Chu Xiu was indeed worthy of his reputation. He had such power just after stepping into the 3-flower realm. No wonder he could compete with the young elites in the Jianghu and was ranked 6th on the Longhu leaderboard. Wei Mok said coldly, "We naturally wouldn't dare to act rashly with the prestige of the Guanzhong torture room, but the Guanzhong torture room also has rules. Official Chu, you are the Zhenzhou Prefecture's patrol inspector. Yet you are meddling in the business competition of another prefecture. I'm afraid this is a little inappropriate, right? Our Wei family might have had some small misunderstandings with you, Official Chu, but that was just a misunderstanding. Leave a line for others to go easy on us in the future. Our Wei family doesn't want to provoke Official Chu, and we hope that Official Chu won't provoke our Wei family." Zhang Kunz looked at Wei Mok with some surprise. This was somewhat different from what they had agreed on before. Previously, Wei Mok's plan was to cut off the hands that Chu Xiu stretched out and make him lose face. Now, it seemed that the Wei family only wanted to protect their own interests. What did he mean by this? In fact, Wei Mok's thinking was much simpler. He didn't want to push things too far at all. At this time, Chu Xiu was like the sun in the sky. Even if they wanted to suppress Chu Xiu, it was almost impossible. The internal department of the Guanzhong torture room wouldn't let a facade figure like Chu Xiu be humiliated by outsiders. Now that he saw Chu Xiu's momentum, he really didn't want to provoke him. If that was the case, then the best choice was to each take a step back. It was best for Chu Xiu to know his place. It didn't matter if he touched the interests of others, as long as he didn't touch the interests of the Wei family. Chu Xiu sneered when he heard this. Is the Wei family talking to me about the rules of the Guanzhong torture room? What a joke! The land of Guanzhong belongs to the Guanzhong torture room. The rules are also decided by the Guanzhong torture room. All you have to do is to abide by the rules. You don't have the qualifications to teach the rules of the Guanzhong torture room. Hearing Chu Xiu's incomparably domineering words, the surrounding constables of the Guanzhong torture room were a lot more excited. There were times when the Guanzhong torture room was domineering, especially when Guan Siyu had just taken over as the hallmaster. It could be said that there were internal conflicts and external pressure. It was precisely because of that situation that Guan Siyu was impartial in handling matters and acted according to the rules of the Guanzhong torture room. She was incomparably domineering towards anyone and any power. It was a pity that as the Guanzhong torture room gradually stabilized over the years, everyone was unwilling to cause trouble. They would often compromise by taking a step back. It had been a long time since Chu Xiu's domineering style was seen. Wei Mok didn't expect Chu Xiu to have such a domineering reaction. He couldn't help but laugh out of anger. What a joke! Whatever rules you say are the rules. Do you think we have to die just because you want us to? Looking at the surrounding people from the Wei and Zhang families, Chu Xiu looked around and said coldly, I want all of you to die, as long as you can do it. But why are you besieging the Zhenzhou patrol hall? Are you trying to rebel? Retreat within 10 breaths of time. Otherwise, you'll be treated as a rebel. Wei Mok sneered. You, Chu Xiu, are really lawless. Whoever you say is a rebel is a rebel. We just want justice today. Since justice isn't here, our 2 families have no intention of leaving today. Chu Xiu snorted. You won't shed a tear until you see the coffin, huh? 10 breaths of time is up. The Wei and Zhang families besieged the Guanzhong torture room. Their crimes are unforgivable. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu's figure moved. The heavenly demon dance in his hand was unsheathed and slashed at Wei Mok with a ghastly demonic aura and soaring blood qi. Good timing. Wei Mok's eyes revealed a touch of coldness. He had originally planned to blow up the matter. Now that Chu Xiu had taken the initiative to attack, it was exactly what he wanted. Therefore, the moment Chu Xiu made his move, Wei Mok said to Zhang Kunz, who was beside him, "Brother Zhang, you don't have to make a move first. Help me hold the line." As soon as he finished speaking, Wei Mok had already unsheathed a dark blue longsword in his hand. The shining ice soul chi was attached to the sword's aura. With a deep chill, it met Chu Xiu's blade. The difference between the 5 chi's origin realm and the 3 flower realm was in the foundation of power. The 3 flower realm was the unification of essence, chi, and spirit. It could bring powerful explosive power to a martial artist. On the other hand, the 5 chi's origin realm was the condensation of the power of the 5 elements in the body's 5 internal organs. It cycled endlessly, and it could bring a martial artist a deep foundation. Therefore, in terms of pure power cultivation, Wei Mok, who had stepped into the 5 chi's origin realm for several years, naturally far surpassed Chu Xiu, who had just stepped into the 3 flower realm. Although it was widely acknowledged that the difference between the 5 chi's gathering in the origin realm and the 3 flowers at prominence realm wasn't that big, a difference of 1 realm was still a difference. Wei Mok was still very confident in himself. However, when the sword and saber collided, Wei Mok's confidence was shattered to the point that not even a little bit remained. The pure demonic aura on the heavenly demon dance was rare in the world. It contained no impurities and was pure demonic aura that was condensed to the extreme. With one slash, Wei Mok's sword aura was completely shattered. His expression suddenly changed. How could Chu Xiu's power be so great? After the collision of power, Wei Mok realized that Chu Xiu was not as strong as him. However, whether it was the astonishing demonic aura on Chu Xiu's long blade or Chu Xiu's aura that was filled with endless power, they were so powerful that he found it unbelievable. When the quality of the aura was strong to the extreme, it could actually completely surpass the quantity. At that moment, Wei Mok's sword momentum suddenly changed from offense to defense. In an instant, the endless sword aura turned into icicles that froze Chu Xiu's blood-refined divine aura. It even spread along Chu Xiu's blade toward Chu Xiu. However, at that moment, the demonic aura on the heavenly demon dance erupted. Boundless black demonic aura also erupted on Chu Xiu's arm. The Avicii demon blade, the gates of hell opened. The pure demonic aura on the heavenly demon dance was like nourishment for Chu Xiu's 3 blades of Avicii. He had only slashed out the first move, but its power was stronger than the previous second move. Chapter 273. Back at the God Armament Conference, Chu Xiu had painstakingly obtained the heavenly demon dance. Although it was not a god armament, it was still a top-grade precious weapon. This was the first time Chu Xiu had used the heavenly demon dance, and his opponent was a martial artist at the 5 chi's collecting in the origin realm. Chu Xiu was actually quite satisfied with its power. At the very least, under Chu Xiu's Avicii demonic blade, the sword aura in Wei Mok's hand was completely shattered. Even he himself was forced to take a step back. Looking at the chip on the long sword in his hand, Wei Mok grimaced with some heartache. The long sword in his hand was a 5th-grade precious weapon produced by the God Armament Pavilion. He had paid a great price to obtain it from a caravan of Eastern Qi. In the end, after clashing with Chu Xiu's saber, a nick had appeared, and the sword was already half ruined. Moreover, this was not the end. Chu Xiu used the 3 Avicii demonic blades one after another. A powerful demonic qi burst out. At this moment, Chu Xiu was like a demon god. He was incomparably valiant and actually forced Wei Mok to retreat again and again. Zhang Kunz, who was holding the line on the side, had a strong sense of fear in his eyes. He had already held the long sword in his hand and was ready to attack at any time. Previously, Zhang Kunz had not placed Chu Xiu in his eyes. He was a little arrogant and had always felt that the reputation of Chu Xiu, a martial artist of the younger generation, was mostly just bragging. In fact, he was not as strong as the rumors said. However, when he saw Chu Xiu today, he believed it. With the strength of the 3 flower realm, Chu Xiu was actually able to suppress Wei Mok, who had stepped into the 5 chi's collecting in the origin realm for several years. Now that Zhang Kunz had replaced Wei Mok, the result would probably not be much better. Just when Zhang Kunz was ready to attack Chu Xiu, a dragon claw of aura several tens of feet in size suddenly fell. The powerful aura directly shook Chu Xiu and blasted Wei Mok to the side. Wei Jiuduan walked out of the crowd with a gloomy face and said coldly, "What are you doing? What are you guys doing? Are you trying to rebel?" Actually, Wei Jiuduan had no intention of coming out. He was more than happy to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Chu Xiu's performance had already somewhat exceeded Wei Zhouduan's expectations, causing him to feel some fear. However, fear was fear. If he was still in his prime, he would definitely not tolerate the existence of a subordinate like Chu Xiu. He would definitely choose to suppress him immediately. But now, he was about to retire. Naturally, it was more important to get benefits. As long as Chu Xiu didn't touch his interests before he retired, Wei Zhouduan didn't plan to care about Chu Xiu anymore. However, now that the Wei family and the Zhang family had caused such a huge ruckus, they had actually sent people to besiege the patrol hall and had even started fighting. If Wei Zhouduan did not show himself and allowed the situation to worsen, he would probably have to retire early as a disciplinary officer. Seeing that they had finally forced Wei Zhouduan out, Wei Moke chuckled and said, "Lord Wei is finally willing to appear? I don't have any intention of rebelling. I just want justice. Official Chu has gone too far. Could it be that he doesn't allow us to cry out our grievances?" Wei Zhouduan frowned and said to Chu Xiu in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu, I don't care about what you've done in the other prefectures, but you've messed up the entire Guanxi region. If I don't do something about it, I'm afraid that the entire Guanxi region will be seething with resentment. Recall all your men. Just take care of the prefectures under your command. Don't meddle in other matters." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "The Punishment Bureau is investigating the various aristocratic families in the Guanxi region to see if there are any smuggling or other illegal activities. Could it be that Lord wants to interfere? Don't forget, other than being an patrol inspector under the Guanxi region, I'm also a secret agent of the Punishment Bureau. The entire Punishment Bureau is under the direct jurisdiction of Hall Master Guan. Lord, I fear you can't control me?" Wei Zhouduan stilled. He had never thought that Chu Xiu would contradict him and even threaten him. It had to be said that Chu Xiu had never disobeyed his orders. Whether it was when he gave Wei Hanshan's prefecture to Yang Ling or Kai Jingsheng's prefecture to Wei Chongling, Chu Xiu could only compromise. Wei Zhouduan had vividly displayed this rule. But now, Chu Xiu dared to disobey his orders. This caused Wei Zhouduan's expression to darken. Nearing Chu Xiu, Wei Zhouduan said in a low voice, "Chu Xiu, what do you want to do? Play this game with me. Don't forget, I haven't retired yet. The Guanxi region still belongs to me. Wei Zhouduan." Chu Xiu said gravely, "I don't want to do anything. I just want to take back what belongs to me. Official Wei, you can do it twice, but not thrice. I gave you face with Yang Ling, and I also gave you face with Wei Chongling. Those were 2 prefectures, and I gave them up. Now, I am just using the power in my hands to get some benefits. Is this breaking the rules? There is no reason in the world for one person to suffer losses. In any case, I will not give up this time. If the Wei and Zhang families are dissatisfied, then let them attack the inspector hall. I, Chu Xiu, am not afraid. If things really get out of hand, I want to see if the blades of the Guanzhong torture room are harder, or the bones of those 2 families are harder." Chu Xiu's domineering words caused Wei Zhouduan's expression to darken. If things really got out of hand, the Wei and Zhang families would be in trouble. They would be liquidated by the Guanzhong torture room. Even he himself would have to retire. Even if Guan Siyu had not found a suitable successor, he would not let a person who could not even maintain peace in his own district be the torture officer. Wei Zhouduan wanted to lecture and reprimand Chu Xiu, but he did not have the courage in front of so many people. The only advantage that Chu Xiu had was that he had made a name for himself in the God Weapon Conference. Some people even called him the face of the Guanzhong torture room. Of course, this was only for the younger generation, but it was enough to shock people. Right now, Chu Xiu had the power. Unless he did something extremely evil, something that even Guan Siyu could not tolerate, no one could touch Chu Xiu during this period of time. Even Wei Zhouduan could not, unless he wanted to be accused of mistreating a meritorious official. So after thinking for a while, Wei Zhouduan suddenly realized that he was helpless against Chu Xiu. At least, he was helpless now. Wei Zhouduan's gaze was dark as he said in a low voice, "You really won't retreat?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "I won't retreat." Wei Zhouduan's eyes revealed an angry and complicated expression. This was the first time he felt that the situation had completely gone out of his control. Chu Xiu was no longer the Chu Xiu that he could do whatever he wanted to him. He had been a disciplinary officer in Guanxi for decades. He had seen his subordinates who were unyielding, who were outwardly obedient, who were secretly disobedient, and who were restless. However, all of them had been subdued by him. Wei Zhouduan did not expect that when he was nearing retirement, someone would suddenly appear and completely break out of his control. Wei Zhouduan had to admit that he had underestimated Chu Xiao. This person's speed of growth was beyond his imagination. In just a short period of time, this Chu Xiao had already broken out of his control and was challenging him. Most importantly, this Chu Xiao's attitude made Wei Zhouduan understand what it meant to have wild ambitions. It was precisely because Chu Xiao had obediently admitted defeat and made concessions the last 2 times that Wei Zhouduan thought that this Chu Xiao was still very sensible and knew his limits. He was no different from his previous subordinates. In the end, he only found out today that Chu Xiao's forbearance and concessions were all an act. Now that his position had been completely stabilized, to the point that even he could not touch him, this Chu Xiao finally revealed his fangs. Good. Very good. Chu Xiao, I have never misjudged a person in this life, but today, I misjudged you. If I had known earlier, I would have helped Wei Hanshan suppress you back then, making it so that you would never have a day to stand out. Wei Zhouduan said in a cold tone. Chu Xiao said indifferently, unfortunately, there is no medicine for regret in this world to eat. Lord Wei, you still have a few years before you completely retire. One must leave a line for others to meet in the future. You are my old superior. Take a step back now, and I will also remember this favor in the future. Why are you fighting for so much? Wei Zhouduan snorted coldly and did not speak. He was the Guanxi region's disciplinary officer. Although he was about to retire, it was precisely at this time that he was even more sensitive. Wei Zhouduan had been in power for so many years. Now, to ask him to take a step back and admit defeat to his subordinates, this was something that Wei Zhouduan could not do. Seeing Wei Zhouduan's appearance, Chu Xiao shook his head and said, since it's like this, then there's nothing to talk about. In any case, the Guanxi region's commercial lifeline is mine. If the Wei and Zhang families want to blow things up, I will accompany them. Even if I am reprimanded by Hall Master Guan in the end, those 2 families will not have a good ending. As for which side Lord Wei wants to stand on, I will not interfere. After saying that, Chu Xiao directly turned around and left, leaving behind a gloomy Wei Zhouduan. Wei Moke and Zhang Kunz looked at each other. Wei Zhouduan, the disciplinary officer, could not even suppress an inspector. What was going on? But seeing that Chu Xiao's side was extremely domineering, Wei Zhouduan could only turn his gaze to Wei Moke and Wei Moke. He said coldly, you 2 have seen Chu Xiao's attitude. It is useless even if you force me out. If your Wei family had not provoked Chu Xiao and insisted on taking the prefecture government that belonged to him, why would Chu Xiao reach out to other places? Karma. Is there any use in crying injustice to me now? Wei Moke was inwardly disdainful. Chu Xiao was clearly an ambitious person. Even if he did not touch the prefecture government that belonged to Chu Xiao this time, would he not reach out to other places? Moreover, Wei Zhouduan had accepted money to agree to hand over the prefecture government that belonged to Chu Xiao to Wei Chongling. But now, he spoke as though it had nothing to do with him. Wei Moke immediately snorted and said, Chu Xiao's actions have completely disrupted the rules of the Guanxi region. How can my Wei family and the Zhang family continue to do business? Cutting off one's path to wealth is like killing one's parents. Lord Wei, you know this. Anyway, this matter will not end until it is resolved. Chapter 274. As a big family in Guanxi, of course, the Wei family would not admit defeat. It was easy to give Chu Xiao some money and spend it like other aristocratic families, but who would make up for the loss of face? For a big family like the Wei family, face was more important than anything else. Wei Zhouduan rubbed his head, feeling a headache coming on. Chu Xiao was extremely powerful, and the Wei and Zhang families did not want to give in. What could he do? In the end, Wei Zhouduan could only say, I'll give you all the prefectures in the Guanxi branch. Your Wei family and Zhang family can move their businesses there. No matter how long Chu Xiao's hand stretches, he won't be able to reach mine. As the penal officer, the state capitals around the Guanxi branch were under Wei Zhouduan's direct jurisdiction. The filial piety from these state capitals also belonged to Wei Zhouduan. Now that Wei Zhouduan had given these businesses to the Wei and Zhang families, The Wei and Zhang family should naturally take out a part of their filial piety to Wei Zhouduan. Therefore, Wei Zhouduan did not suffer a loss. However, at this point, someone would suffer a loss. The real losers were the martial arts forces in the state capitals under Wei Zhouduan's command. The Wei family and the Zhang family, these two hegemonic clans, had suddenly intervened in the affairs of these states and prefectures. How could the small local powers have any meat to eat? It would be difficult for them to even drink soup. Of course, the Wei clan and the Zhang clan wouldn't care about this. Since Wei Zhouduan had spoken, the two of them cupped their hands and said, "Since that's the case, we will give Lord Wei face and stop making a fuss." After that, the two of them also left. Although the matter was temporarily over, the storm in Guanxi had not yet subsided. After this incident, whether it was the inspectors in Guanxi or the local martial arts forces, they all saw how powerful Chu Xiu was. Even Wei Zhouduan could not do anything to this subordinate. The Wei and Zhang families could not do anything to this Chu Xiu. Once they figured this out, the martial arts forces of other states and prefectures were completely convinced. If they did not want all their businesses to be annexed, they could only obediently give their filial piety to Chu Xiu. As for Zhang Taoran and the other patrol envoys, they understood many things through this matter. Wei Zhouduan was probably really old. It was time for their attitude to change. At this moment, the Wei family's patriarch was listening to Wei Mok's report with a grave expression. A long while later, the Wei ancestor sighed. "These are troubled times." Wei Mok asked doubtfully, "Hasn't everything been resolved? Our Wei family did not retreat in the end, nor did we suffer any losses. Is there anything else?" Ancestor Wei sighed. "You have to look further ahead. The problem at hand has been solved, but what about the future? According to your description, Chu Xiu's character should be very overbearing. He has the look of a hawk and a wolf. Obviously, he is the kind of person with wild ambitions who is unwilling to live in peace. He is only a patrol envoy now. He only has some reputation among the patrol envoys, but he dared to stir up such a big matter. He even went against Wei Zhouduan. What will he be like when he becomes the penal officer? Wei Zhouduan is already old, and the true elites of the Guangzhou torture room are in the narcotics department. Those people are good at killing people, but they are not good at managing places. Therefore, the probability of Chu Xiu becoming the penal officer is very high. Now that our Wei family has already formed enmity with Chu Xiu, and thinking about Chu Xiu's character, if he really becomes the penal officer, what trouble will he stir up? Will our Wei family have a good ending? Wei Mok hesitated. Then, Patriarch, what should our Wei family do now? The Wei family's patriarch said in a deep voice. Wait. Chu Xiu has a great influence now, and even Wei Zhouduan can't touch him, let alone our Wei family. When that halo disappears, Wei Zhouduan won't let him off, even if our Wei family doesn't find trouble with him. At that time, we just need to add fuel to the fire and watch from the side. There will naturally be people who will deal with Chu Xiu. Wei Mok nodded. In fact, he wasn't too worried. Their Wei family had experienced so many ups and downs in Guangzhou, and their history was even longer than the Guangzhou torture room. They had seen enemies stronger than Chu Xiu, but in the end, hadn't their Wei family still tortured them to death? One Chu Xiu was nothing. Now that everyone had restrained themselves and didn't want to make a move, Chu Xiu saw that there was nothing for his subordinates to do, so he only gave some instructions and went into seclusion. Back then, in front of the Water Cloud Monastery, Taoist Xian Chang had explained the 5 Qis unifications, and Chu Xiu agreed with his Taoist views. The heart belonged to the fire element, so one had to subdue the heart monkey and focus the mind. Treat the 5 viscera as 5 barriers and cultivate meticulously, reaching the pinnacle of each of them. This way, the 5 elements would merge into one and circulate endlessly, reaching the true pinnacle of the 5 Qis unifications. It could be said that this kind of cultivation method was a bit slow, but it was the best way to build a solid foundation. If Chu Xiu followed these detailed steps to polish the 5 Qis unifications realm, then when he really reached the 5 Qis unifications realm, he would be able to compete with other warriors who had already reached the 5 Qis unifications realm. The Taoist techniques were upright and gentle. Although the cultivation seemed slow, it was the most important to build a solid foundation. The first technique that Chu Xiu obtained was the Xiantian technique of the Taoist sect. Therefore, the traces of his cultivation also had a strong Taoist imprint. For the current Chu Xiu, he could be considered to be a dual cultivator of Taoism Buddhism, and demonic Tao. Among them, the Taoist techniques helped him to build his foundation, while the demonic Tao techniques brought great power to Chu Xiu. As for the Buddhist techniques, they were both offensive and defensive. They could be adjusted in the middle, allowing Chu Xiu's cultivation to be more harmonious. After 3 months of seclusion, Chu Xiu's cultivation level actually didn't increase much. However, his understanding of the 5 Qis unifications and the accumulation of the power of the 5 viscera in his body had increased a lot. This was a painstaking process, and it also required enlightenment. Although it was a little taxing in the early stages, it would be able to soar in the later stages. After 3 months, Chu Xiu was ready to come out of seclusion. Most of the people in the patrol hall were active in other prefectures. Only Du Guangzhong and the Ghost Hand King were better at handling some internal affairs. Therefore, they had been staying in the patrol hall. Seeing that Chu Xiu had come out of seclusion, the Ghost Hand King asked, "Did you gain anything from your seclusion?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "It's only been 3 months. How could there be anything? By the way, did anything happen in Guanxi during this time?" Du Guangzhong was slightly speechless when he heard this. His lord was really domineering. If the other patrol envoys came out of seclusion, the first thing they would ask would be whether anything had happened in the prefecture under their jurisdiction. However, their master was different. He directly asked if anything had happened in the Guanxi region. He really put himself in the same position as Wei Zhouduan. Of course, the current Chu Xiu was also qualified. In the whole of Guanxi, except for the prefectures directly managed by Wei Zhouduan, the commercial lifelines of the other places were controlled by Chu Xiu. Moreover, all the martial arts forces in the whole of Guanxi, except for the 2 major families, the Wei family and the Zhang family, had chosen to side with Chu Xiu. There were also patrols like Jiang Taoran. They feared Chu Xiu even more than Wei Zhouduan. It could be said that Chu Xiu's power was not inferior to Wei Zhouduan, the real penal officer, except for the fact that he did not have the position of penal officer. The Ghost Hand King said, "It's been very quiet during this time. The martial arts forces in Guanxi are also very well behaved. Even the Wei clan and the Zhang clan have already laid down their banners and stopped making any movements." Chu Xiu nodded. He had also guessed that this would be the result. After all, he had the upper hand now. The Wei family and the Zhang family were not idiots. Of course, they would not find trouble with him at this time. At this time, Du Guangzhong suddenly said, "But a few days ago, there was some interesting news from the headquarters. There was a murder case in Eastern Qi. The family of Qiu Zhenxing, the owner of the Pegasus Ranch, was killed. This matter even alarmed the Eastern Qi royal family. So now the royal family of Eastern Qi has sent someone to the headquarters, asking them to send someone to investigate this matter. It is said that they have offered a very high price. Now the headquarters is thinking about who to send for the investigation." After hearing this, Chu Xiu was stunned. The owner of the Pegasus Ranch, Qiu Zhenxing, was dead? There was a deviation from the original plot here. The Pegasus Ranch was the largest ranch in Eastern Qi. The horses domesticated there were specially supplied to the Eastern Qi military. As the owner of the Pegasus Ranch, Qiu Zhenxing was not a member of the Eastern Qi imperial court. He was a man of Jianghu. The horses produced by the Pegasus Ranch were initially sold to various Jianghu forces for transportation. But later, because of the excellent quality of the horses, the Pegasus Ranch was targeted by the Eastern Qi imperial court. And Qiu Zhenxing was quite sensible. He directly offered the Pegasus Ranch to the Eastern Qi imperial court and became a member of the Eastern Qi imperial court in one leap. The Eastern Qi imperial court also returned the favor. Every profession had its own specialization. The Pegasus Ranch was still managed by Qiu Zhenxing. Moreover, the Eastern Qi imperial court also gave a lot of money and resources to Qiu Zhenxing to expand the Pegasus Ranch. But the horses produced were mainly supplied to the Eastern Qi military. Originally, no matter how famous a horse breeder was, he should not be very popular. However, in the original version of the plot, Qiu Zhenxing accidentally obtained an extremely powerful ancient technique from an island in the East China Sea. It could predict the secrets of heaven and see through the changes of heaven, earth, and man. It was extremely powerful. Qiu Zhenxing cultivated in seclusion for 3 years to comprehend the divine skill and stepped into the realm of martial arts grandmaster. With only one move, he severely injured a martial arts grandmaster from the diabolism. From then on, Qiu Zhenxing became completely famous in Jianghu. Even the Eastern Qi imperial court gave him more preferential treatment and allowed him to continue to stay in the Pegasus Ranch. Such a famous big shot in the original plot was now dead. This plot deviation made Chu Xiu a little confused. Chapter 275. Chu Xiu did not know how to react to the sudden death of a future big shot. When he came to his senses, the first thing Chu Xiu considered was whether this matter would benefit him or not. Anyway, the plot had deviated and changed. Qiu Zhenxing's life or death had nothing to do with him. However, he was interested in the cultivation method in Qiu Zhenxing's hands. Chu Xiu knew where some powerful cultivation methods in the original version were, and he also knew who had them. However, the problem was that he could not get them even if he wanted to. Chu Xiu naturally wanted the cultivation method in Qiu Zhenxing's hands, but the problem was that Qiu Zhenxing was the owner of the Pegasus pasture. He was a great master in the oneness of heaven and human beings realm. Moreover, the Pegasus pasture was considered an industry of the Eastern Qi imperial court. With Chu Xiu's current poor cultivation, he would be courting death if he wanted to snatch something from Qiu Zhenxing. Chu Xiu suddenly turned to Du Guangzhong and asked, "What was Qiu Zhenxing's strength when he died?" Du Guangzhong was stunned and said, "He was a great master in the oneness of heaven and human beings realm. However, the Pegasus pasture is very important to the Eastern Qi. That's why the Eastern Qi imperial court was alerted and specially came to the Guangzhong torture room to ask someone to investigate." Du Guangzhong thought that Chu Xiu asked about Qiu Zhenxing's strength because he was curious that the matter had alarmed the Eastern Qi imperial court. Chu Xiu's eyes showed a hint of surprise when he heard this. If this was the case, then Qiu Zhenxing should have obtained the cultivation method by now and had not succeeded in practicing it. However, he was killed for some unknown reason. At present, Chu Xiu did not know whether the cultivation method had fallen into the hands of others after Qiu Zhenxing's death. Even Chu Xiu did not know whether Qiu Zhenxing's death had anything to do with the cultivation method. However, this did not affect Chu Xiu from going to investigate. If the cultivation method had not been taken away by others, Chu Xiu would have made a big profit this time. Therefore, Chu Xiu asked directly, "Hallmaster, who are you going to send?" Du Guangzhong said, "It's not decided yet. Although the one who died wasn't a martial arts grandmaster, it's still something that even the royal family of Eastern Qi is paying attention to. So, Lord Clan Leader is going to select some elites to go to Eastern Qi. Are you interested in that as well?" Du Guangzhong felt a little strange. This kind of thing was a good thing for others, but it didn't mean much to Chu Xiu. The Jianghu constables who were invited by the major powers would naturally have an extra income, which was definitely much higher than their salary. But the question was, did Chu Xiu lack money? The commercial lifeline of the entire Guanxi region was in the hands of Chu Xiu, so he didn't care about this little bit of mission income. Moreover, although Chu Xiu's strength was the best among the younger generation of the Guangzhong torture room, he knew nothing about the special skills of the Guangzhong torture room, such as investigating traces and tracking down the murderer. Even the ordinary Jianghu constables in the innate realm were better than Chu Xiu. Therefore, Du Guangzhong had always felt that Chu Xiu should not be an inspector, and that it was more suitable for him to go to the criminal division. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "I'm a little interested. I'll go to the headquarters and see if I can get this job." Although the missions of the torture hall were all assigned by the hallmaster, Chu Xiu naturally had a way to get them. After giving some instructions to Du Guangzhong and the Ghost Hand King, Chu Xiu went straight to Guangzhong City. However, he didn't go directly to the headquarters, but went to Chu Yuanxing's place. Seeing that Chu Xiu had come, Chu Yuanxing thought that he had come to Guangzhong on official business, but Chu Xiu said, "I'm here this time to ask for a favor from you, Brother Chu." Chu Yuanxing waved his hand and said, "What is it? Just tell me, Brother Chu." If anyone else wanted to help, Chu Yuanxing would most likely agree, let alone Chu Xiu. For the current Chu Yuanxing, he considered himself to be Chu Xiu's talent scout, and their relationship was very close. Chu Xiu said, "It's like this. I heard that Eastern Qi wants someone to help with a case, and I'm planning to go to Eastern Qi. I'm good friends with Mo Tianlin, a disciple of the Mo family of Shangyang, and he wants to discuss something with me. It just so happens that I don't have a reason yet, so I want to use this case to go to Eastern Qi." Many people knew that Chu Xiu was good friends with Mo Tianlin of the Mo family of Shangyang. Chu Yuanxing didn't have any doubts, but said directly, "Don't worry, leave this to me. It just so happens that the hall master is going to choose someone tomorrow. Brother Chu, with your strength, the hall master won't refuse. Chu Xiao cupped his hands and said, Then I'll have to trouble you, Brother Chu. No need to be so polite between us. Come, let's go to my place for a drink first. Chu Yuanxing directly pulled Chu Xiao back to his courtyard. The next morning, Chu Yuanxing arrived early in the Guanzhong torture room's meeting hall. Other than Guan Siyu and the criminal division's third leader, Bloody Ghost Butcher, Si Ming, there was also a white-faced, beardless eunuch in a black brocade robe. The eunuch asked slowly in a slightly shrill voice, Hall Master Guan, this time His Majesty sent me here to say that this matter must be investigated thoroughly. It's best if the Guanzhong torture room sends more people here. After this matter is over, there will be plenty of rewards. Guan Siyu nodded. She was about to say something when she saw Chu Yuanxing being led in. Guan Siyu introduced Chu Yuanxing and said, This is Eunuch Wang Jin, the deputy chief of the Palm Seal Department of the Eastern Qi Imperial Palace. Chu Yuanxing nodded. This time, the people sent by the Eastern Qi Imperial Palace were really important. There were 3 departments in the Eastern Qi Imperial Palace. They were organizations that were loyal to the imperial family, and the chief eunuchs were all martial arts grandmasters. Legend had it that the Eastern Qi Imperial Palace also had a chief of 3 departments. He controlled all the forces in the Eastern Qi Imperial Palace, and was an old monster who had served generations of the Eastern Qi Imperial Palace. His strength was even more frightening. Although this Wang Jin was only a deputy chief, he should be a great expert at the oneness of heaven and man realm. He was the emperor's confidant. For the Eastern Qi Imperial Palace to send him here, it was obvious that they valued this matter very much. Then, Guan Siyu pointed at Chu Yuanxing and said, This is Chu Yuanxing, the descendant of my Guanzhong torture room's previous hallmaster, Chu Kuanga. When Wang Jin heard Chu Kuanga's name, he immediately stood up and cupped his hands at Chu Yuanxing. So it's the great hero of Guanzhong. I've been impolite. Although I'm just a eunuch, the person I admire the most is someone like great hero Chu. I wish I could look up to him. What a pity. Wang Jin did not seem to be pretending. In fact, his attitude towards Chu Yuanxing was even better than his attitude towards Guan Siyu. Chu Yuanxing smiled and did not mind. He had seen Wang Jin mention his father the moment he saw him, saying how much he admired and looked up to him. He was already used to it. Guan Siyu asked, Yuanxing, what's the matter? I'm discussing something with Eunuch Wang. If you're not in a hurry, you can wait for a while. We'll talk about it later. Chu Yuanxing said, I'm here because of this matter. Brother Guan, aren't you still thinking about who to send to Eastern Qi? What do you think of Chu Xiao? Among the warriors in the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiao is the strongest among the younger generation. Moreover, he has been to Eastern Qi's Jeju prefecture before. That place is not far from the Pegasus farm. Isn't it suitable to send him? Chu Xiao had been recommended to the Guanzhong torture room by Chu Yuanxing. Now that Chu Yuanxing wanted to recommend Chu Xiao to carry out this mission, it was very normal. However, the only thing that Guan Siyu was conflicted about was Chu Xiao's ability. In terms of ability, there was no need to talk about Chu Xiao. Chu Xiao's performance at the God Weapon Conference was enough to prove everything. But this time, the Guanzhong torture room was sending someone to investigate a case. It was fine for Chu Xiao to kill people, but could he investigate a case? Just then, Wang Jin suddenly said, The Chu Xiao you guys are talking about, is he the Chu Xiao who crippled the Azure Water Sword Sect's Shen Bai and killed the evil extreme sect's Tong Kai Tai at the God Weapon Conference? Chu Yuanxing nodded and said, That's right. Eunuch Wang. Have you heard of this name? Wang Jin nodded and said, I have heard of the most outstanding young elite of this generation in the Guanzhong torture room. A few months ago, he was very impressive at the God Weapon Conference. This Chu Xiao is not bad. Let him do it. His Majesty had personally instructed him, Wang Jin, to handle this matter safely and to find more people to help him. But the problem was that Wang Jin really didn't understand the internal affairs of the Guanzhong torture room. After being reminded by Chu Yuanxing, Wang Jin then recalled that this Chu Xiao was rather famous. It could be said that he was more famous than 99% of the martial artists in the Guanzhong torture room. Since that was the case, choosing this Chu Xiao was definitely the right choice. In any case, in Wang Jin's opinion, the stronger one's reputation and ability were, the stronger one's ability would be. After hearing Wang Jin say this, Guan Xiu had no choice but to say, "All right then. This time, let Chu Xiu lead the team to Eastern Qi. At the same time bring more people." Chu Simo's godson, Chu Xiaoda, Xiao Yi's disciple, Cheng Zhouhai, Yin Buotong's new disciple, Wang Qianping, and Ximing's disciple, Zhong Ping, follow them as well. Chu Xiu will lead the team. Guan Xiu was also a little afraid that Chu Xiu wouldn't be able to handle the situation by himself. Among these people, although Chu Xiaoda and Cheng Zhouhai were young, they were experienced constables and were very good at finding traces. After Yin Buotong's previous disciple, Li Tianhao, had been crippled by Chu Xiu, he had taken in a new disciple, Wang Qianping, who was also a veteran constable in the Guangzhou torture room. His ability in this aspect wasn't bad either. The only ones who weren't good at these things were probably Chu Xiu and Zhong Ping. However, it didn't matter. It was fine as long as these two were good at killing. Turning her head, Guan Xiu said to Wang Jin, "These people are practically the most outstanding among this generation of disciples in the Guangzhou torture room. Are you satisfied with letting them go, Eunuch Wang?" Wang Jin nodded and said, "Sure, not bad. In that case, I'll have to trouble Hall Master Guan this time." How could Wang Jin know the background of Chu Xiu and the others? In any case, he heard that these people were either the disciplinary officer's disciples, godson, or disciples of the disciplinary officer's leader. They didn't look like ordinary people. As long as he brought them back to Eastern Qi, he would have completed half of his mission. The people who died were only martial artists at the oneness of heaven and man realm. They weren't martial Dao masters, so it was more than enough to bring Chu Xiu and the others along. Chapter 276. At the entrance of the torture chamber headquarters, Chu Xiu and the other warriors who were preparing to go to Eastern Qi had already gathered. Among them, Chu Xiu was not very familiar with Chu Xiaoda and Zhong Ping. When they saw each other, they just greeted each other. Cheng Zhouhai, who had fought with Chu Xiu before, was convinced by Chu Xiu's strength, smiled and said, "Brother Chu, we meet again. You are indeed the one who defeated me. I knew you would make a name for yourself at the God Weapon Conference." Zhong Ping said coldly, "There are many people who can defeat you, but not all of them will make a name for themselves at the God Weapon Conference." Cheng Zhouhai shrugged at Chu Xiu and said, "It's really boring to deal with people who don't know how to joke. Brother Chu, Hall Chief Guan asked you to lead the team for this case. Do you have any news?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I only heard about it for the first time. I only know some general information. Moreover, I am not good at this aspect, so I will have to rely on you guys." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Cheng Zhouhai and Chu Xiaoda both had a good impression of Chu Xiu. They knew that Zhong Ping and Chu Xiu were not good at detecting traces, but because Chu Xiu was the most famous and powerful, the Hall Chief still asked Chu Xiu to lead the team. Cheng Zhouhai was afraid that Chu Xiu would be obstinate and self-opinionated. If an outsider gave orders to an expert, then the case would be difficult to solve. The Eastern Qi royal family attached great importance to this case. If they completed the task well, they would be rewarded handsomely. But if they failed, not only would they damage the reputation of the Guangzhou torture room, but they would also be punished when they returned. Now it seemed that Chu Xiu had a good sense of propriety. He knew that professional things should be done by professionals. At this moment, a 30-year-old physical invulnerability martial artist walked over from afar. He cupped his hands towards the crowd and smiled apologetically. "My apologies, everyone. I'm a little late." Cheng Zhouhai secretly transmitted his voice to Chu Xiu. "This guy is Yin Buotong's new disciple, Wang Qianping. Brother Chu, be careful of this guy. This guy is famous for being a smiling tiger. Last time, when Li Tianhao was crippled by you, Yin Buotong had to take in a disciple to keep up appearances. This Wang Qianping's strength is average, but his methods are extremely sinister. He got rid of a few competitors, and he's good at flattery. That's how he became Yin Buotong's disciple." At this moment, Wang Qianping walked forward and bowed to Chu Xiu. His attitude was very humble. "This must be Chu Xiu's official Chu, right?" Official Chu is indeed the number one among the younger generation of the Guangzhou torture room. He's an outstanding figure who surpasses all other martial artists of the same level. With official Chu as the leader, This task should be a piece of cake and can be completed easily. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and looked at Wang Qianping. Logically speaking, he was Yin Buotong's disciple, so his attitude towards Chu Xiu should be hostile. In the end, this fellow's attitude was extremely humble, and even had a hint of flattery. However, in reality, Chu Xiu had seen through his intentions with a single glance. Chu Xiu was just as Cheng Zhouhai had said, a man with a smile on his face. On the surface, it looked like he was flattering Chu Xiu and putting a lot of good words on Chu Xiu. But Cheng Zhouhai, Chu Xiaoda, and Zhong Pinka, who were around Chu Xiu, were also outstanding figures of the younger generation of the Guanzhong torture room. Wang Qianping's words were meant to make Chu Xiu die from flattery, so that Cheng Zhouhai and the others would feel resentful and dissatisfied towards Chu Xiu. But his plan was in vain. Even after hearing what they said, Cheng Zhouhai and the others did not feel resentful. It was not that they were very broad-minded. But during the competition, Chu Xiu had already shown his overwhelming strength. He deserved to be the number one among the younger generation of the Guanzhong torture room. This was the truth. What was there for them to be jealous of? Wang Qianping did not see that battle, but now he was still playing these little tricks in front of Chu Xiu. It was ridiculous. At this time, Chu Xiu kept looking at Wang Qianping, saying nothing. Until Wang Qianping felt a little scared, he said indifferently, "This task was personally arranged by the hall leader, and the other party is also a member of the Eastern Qi royal family. Such a big task is a piece of cake for you to tell me. How can you complete the task with such a slack attitude? Do you need me to tell the hall leader to get someone else to do it?" Wang Qianping's expression changed slightly, and he said with a sheepish smile, "Official Chu, you must be joking. I was just saying. Now that we are there, we will naturally investigate carefully and complete the task as soon as possible." After giving Wang Qianping a warning, the deputy manager of the Palm Seal Department, Wang Jin, also arrived with his men. Chu Xiu cupped his hands at Wang Jin and said, "Greetings, Eunuch Wang." Seeing the aura of Chu Xiu and the others, Wang Jin nodded with satisfaction and said, "You are Chu Xiu, right? Not bad. Since Hall Leader Guan has handed everything to you, I believe in Hall Leader Guan's judgment. Get to the bottom of the case as soon as possible. When I go back, I will be able to report to His Majesty. You will also be rewarded handsomely." Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, "Rest assured, Eunuch Wang. Professional matters should be handled by professionals. The Guanzhong torture room is definitely professional in this aspect." Wang Jin nodded and said, "All right, let's get going now." With that said, the group of people got on their fast horses and rushed to Eastern Qi as fast as they could. On the way, Chu Xiu also asked Wang Jin, "Eunuch Wang, did Eastern Qi find any clues or information immediately after Qiu Zhenxing was killed?" Cheng Zhouhai and the others were also listening attentively. Chu Xiu was asking on their behalf. After all, they were the ones who were really good at this kind of thing. Wang Jin shook his head and said, "There were almost no clues. Although Qiu Zhenxing was the owner of the Pegasus farm, it was impossible for him to live in the farm. Instead, he lived in a manor near the farm. Moreover, Qiu Zhenxing was a simple man and didn't like luxury. He didn't have any disciples either. There were only his wife and son in the entire manor, as well as 5 servants who took care of them. In the end, all of them were killed overnight. 3 days later, when the people from the Pegasus farm found it strange that Qiu Zhenxing hadn't shown up for such a long time, they personally came to the manor to look for him. It was only then that they realized he was already dead." "Then did Qiu Zhenxing have any enemies?" Chu Xiu asked again. Wang Jin shook his head and said, "It's most likely that he was killed in the pugilistic world. The people from Eastern Qi have also investigated, but they didn't find any clues. Before Qiu Zhenxing joined our Eastern Qi, he was just a horse dealer. He was half a pugilistic world man and half a businessman. Moreover, he was kind and had a good reputation. It said that when some pugilistic world people were so poor that they couldn't even afford a horse, Qiu Zhenxing would take the initiative to give it to them without taking a single cent. After Qiu Zhenxing joined our Eastern Qi Imperial Court, our Eastern Qi Imperial Court wouldn't be stingy to our own people. Qiu Zhenxing's strength increased greatly, and so did the scale of the Pegasus farm. From then on, Qiu Zhenxing would also help some pugilistic world people who came and went to the Pegasus farm. As long as he could help and it didn't violate the pugilistic world's morality, Qiu Zhenxing wouldn't refuse. In my opinion, Qiu Zhenxing is the real benevolent one. At least, he's much more benevolent than the Northern Yan's morgue. Over the years, many people have received Qiu Zhenxing's kindness, but it's really hard to find anyone who has a grudge against him. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. He really didn't expect Qiu Zhenxing to have such a good reputation. However, in the original plot, Qiu Zhenxing became famous because of the cultivation method that he accidentally obtained. After all, Qiu Zhenxing's talent and strength could only be considered average. Although the Pegasus farm was not small, it was still a horse breeding business. In the end, Qiu Zhenxing relied on a cultivation method to step into the martial Dao master level. One could imagine how powerful that cultivation method was, so most people had their eyes on that cultivation method. This time, Chu Xiu also suspected that Qiu Zhenxing's death was related to that cultivation method. He only hoped that it was not related, otherwise, Chu Xiu's trip would be in vain. Half a month later, Chu Xiu and the rest arrived at the Ji State Prefecture. However, they did not enter the prefecture. Instead, they went directly to the manor where Qiu Zhenxing was. The Pegasus farm was on a plain in the east of the Ji State Prefecture. Qiu Zhenxing's manor was not far away from the Pegasus farm. It was a small villa. Just like what Wang Jin said, Qiu Zhenxing was a simple person. For example, Chu Xiu had seen the Luo family's house in the Jianzhou Prefecture. It was definitely 100 times more luxurious than Qiu Zhenxing's manor. However, Qiu Zhenxing, a powerhouse at unity of heaven and man, lived in such a place. It was really simple, especially since the Pegasus farm's property could even be said to be richer than a sect. After stepping into the manor, there was a commotion inside. Wang Jin immediately frowned. At that moment, in the courtyard of the manor, a young man in his 20s was angrily saying to a middle-aged martial artist in armor, "Sir, I'm a son. Now that my father is dead, I don't even have the right to see the corpse and pay my respects?" The middle-aged martial artist in armor had a cold expression on his face. He had the cultivation of unity of heaven and man. When he heard what the young man said, he only said coldly, "Young Master Qiu, I'm sorry. The higher-ups have ordered that no one is allowed to touch the corpse before the people from the Guanzhong torture room arrive. Even this manor has been taken over by the Dragon Riders' Imperial Army. No one is allowed to act recklessly." The young man looked sad and angry. There were 5 martial artists around him, 4 men and 1 woman. They were not weak. 3 of them were at the 5 cheese collecting in Mind Realm, and 2 of them were at the 3 flower realm. At that moment, they were all comforting the young man. Wang Jin walked in and said with a frown, "What's the commotion? What's going on?" Seeing that everyone was looking at them, Wang Jin said to Chu Xiu, "This is Fang Zhenqi, the general of the Dragon Riders' Imperial Army's Breaking Vanguard Battalion. He was also sent by His Majesty to assist in this case." Looking at Fang Zhenqi, Chu Xiu could not help but have a strange look in his eyes. This was because he had used the Breaking Vanguard Battalion's token to pretend to be a member of the Dragon Riders' Imperial Army to escape from the sinful branch leader. The Dragon Riders' Imperial Army members who died in the Chu family were all from the Breaking Vanguard Battalion, including Chu Xiu's cheapskate father. However, Chu Xiu did not expect to meet the real deal today. Chapter 277. When Li Gui saw Li Kuei, Chu Xiu wasn't afraid. Instead, he cupped his hands towards Fang Zhenqi and said, "Greetings to General Fang." Back then, not many people knew the details of Chu Xiu pretending to be a Dragon Rider Imperial Guard. The Heavenly Sin branch leader had already gone to the Blue Dragon Society's headquarters, so it was probably impossible for him to have any dealings with the Dragon Rider Imperial Guard. Meanwhile, the Hall Master of the White Tiger Hall had been killed by the Heavenly Sin branch leader, so there was no evidence. What was there for Chu Xiu to be afraid of? Fang Zhenqi looked at Chu Xiu and nodded. He said coldly, "Nothing in the manor has been touched, and the corpses have been preserved. You can inspect them at any time." Wang Jin looked at the few people in the manor and frowned. Who are they? What are they doing here? Didn't His Majesty order that before the people from the Guanzhong torture room arrive, outsiders are not allowed to enter the manor? Before Fang Zhenqi could say anything, the young man said with grief and indignation, "This is the Qiu clan's manor. Now that my father has died, how am I an outsider?" Wang Jin said in surprise, "Isn't Qiu Zhenxing's son dead? Who is he?" Fang Zhenqi said indifferently, He is Qiu Zhenxing's illegitimate son, Qiu Dongmao. He has always been staying in Shangyang County. He only rushed over after hearing about Qiu Zhenxing's death. Wang Jin nodded. Chu Xiu stood behind Wang Jin and sent a voice transmission. Eunuch Wang, what's going on with this illegitimate son? Qiu Zhenxing is an expert at the unity of heaven and man realm. And he isn't from any aristocratic family. How did he produce an illegitimate son? Ordinary wealthy merchants had groups of wives and concubines. For a martial artist of Qiu Zhenxing's level and his identity as the Pegasus farm owner, it was not a problem for him to have as many women as he wanted. Moreover, in order to maintain the nobility of their bloodline, ordinary aristocratic families would always find women from aristocratic families of the same level to marry. The children of such aristocratic families would be considered illegitimate children. Qiu Zhenxing was a martial artist from a humble background. Of course, the more children he had, the better. How could he have illegitimate children? Wang Jin explained telepathically. Qiu Zhenxing came from a humble background. He's really one of those Jianghu people who work as escorts and horses for others. His wife married him before he made a name for himself. From then on, Qiu Zhenxing swore that he would only love his wife for the rest of his life. This has become a legend in the martial arts world of Eastern Qi. Therefore, if Qiu Zhenxing really has an illegitimate child, it's normal for him to raise the child outside because he doesn't want to break his promise to his wife. As she spoke, Wang Jin looked at Fang Zhenqi. Fang Zhenqi also nodded, proving that Qiu Dongmao was indeed Qiu Zhenxing's son. The Imperial Dragon Riders also had their own intelligence channels. If Qiu Dongmao was a fake, he wouldn't have been able to enter the manor. Who are the rest of them? Wang Jin asked. Fang Zhenqi said calmly, they're the Jiangdong Five. They've received Qiu Zhenxing's kindness in the past. This time, they're here to escort Qiu Dongmao, Qiu Zhenxing's only son. They even want to overestimate themselves and avenge Qiu Zhenxing. Fang Zhenqi's words were somewhat sarcastic. Even Eastern Qi had not found out where the murderer was, and these people wanted to avenge him? However, when Chu Xiu heard the name of the Jiangdong Five, he couldn't help but look at them a few more times. The so-called Jiangdong Five were 5 young heroes from Jiangdong Commandery of Eastern Qi. They imitated the chivalry manner and swore an oath of brotherhood. They were motivated to be chivalrous and help those in need. To a practical person like Chu Xiu, this so-called oath of brotherhood was a little ridiculous, especially when these people imitated the chivalry manner. The chivalry manner was indeed famous in Jianghu. 30 years ago, the 5 swore an oath of brotherhood. 30 years later, the chivalry manner had become one of the 6 gangs of human harmony. However, only those who truly knew the ins and outs of the story would know why the 5 swore an oath of brotherhood only became one. Some of the things that happened were very ironic. At present, the Jiangdong Five had just begun to show their talents. Therefore, the 5 of them had really become sworn brothers because of the spirit of brotherhood. They had done many chivalrous deeds in the past few years and had a good reputation around Jiangdong Commandery. The nickname of the Jiangdong Five was given to them by the martial artists of Jiangdong Commandery. However, in the original plot, he knew that these 5 people would eventually fall apart. The inside story was very interesting, and it was enough to make the Jianghu gossip spread for months. The strength of the Jiangdong's 5 heroes was worthy of the title of young elites. Although they could not compare to Chu Xiu, who was ranked on the Longhu leaderboard, they were still considered relatively young. The 5 of them were the leader, Chang Buhui, who was in his 40s. He was in his 40s and had the power of 5 Qi's origin state. He was dressed in coarse clothes and carried an ancient heavy sword on his back. However, his aura was extraordinary. His face was square and resolute, and he was the calmest. The second eldest, profound flowing water Dong Xiangyi, was nearly 40 years old. He was handsome and had a small mustache. He behaved like a playboy from an aristocratic family. He wore a brocade robe and held a folding fan. His strength was at the 5 Qis collecting in origin state. The third eldest was blood-avoiding sword, Lu Tong. He was about 30 years old and had a parallel scar on each side of his face. He looked very awkward and indifferent. He also had the cultivation of 5 Qis collecting in the origin, but he was only in the early stage. The fourth prince, Autumn Moonblade, Wu Tiandong, was also in his 30s. He was handsome and wore a white warrior suit with 2 blades at his waist. He was dressed like a Jianghu hero and had the cultivation of the three-flower realm at one's prominence. The most eye-catching of the five was the youngest of the five, dancing willow returning wind, Lu Qingqing. She was also the only woman among the five. Lu Qingqing looked like she was in her early 20s, but she was actually over 30 years old. However, she had entered the three-flower realm at one's prominence very early, so she still looked young and beautiful. She wore a snow-white gauze dress, but the wide sleeves and waist were tied with a rope to prevent it from affecting her performance during a fight. However, it also revealed her curvaceous figure. Chu Xiao stared at Lu Qingqing with a strange expression. It was said that women were the source of trouble, but Lu Qingqing, who could only be described as beautiful but not stunning, was the source of trouble. In the original plot, the five heroes of Jiangdong, who had a promising future, were destroyed by this woman, although she didn't mean it. At this moment, Lu Qingqing felt Chu Xiao's gaze. She frowned slightly and took a step back, a look of disgust in her eyes. Women would always encounter all kinds of things when they roamed the world, especially beautiful women. Lu Qingqing had encountered many people who looked at her strangely when she roamed the world, but the gaze Chu Xiao gave her made her feel very uncomfortable. It was as if she was being seen through. Sensing Chu Xiao's gaze and Lu Qingqing's discomfort, the fourth prince, Wu Tiandong, took a step forward and stood in front of Lu Qingqing. He shouted angrily at Chu Xiao. "What are you looking at? Have you never seen a woman before?" Chu Xiao said indifferently, "I have seen women before, but I have never seen a woman who thinks too highly of herself. Luo Feiheng of Wujuan's Luo family is a good friend of mine. Although he doesn't act like a woman, his appearance is not something any woman can compare to. And you, if you are afraid of others looking at your woman, then go hide at home and act like a lady from a wealthy family. Since you want to roam the world, why are you afraid of others looking at you?" Lu Qingqing's face turned pale at Chu Xiao's words. Although she was a person of the world, she was also a woman. Which woman could tolerate someone saying that she thought too highly of herself and that her appearance was inferior to others? Although it was true that she was inferior, Wu Tiandong had a fiery temper and Lu Qingqing was the woman he had always admired. Hearing this, he immediately pulled out the two slender autumn moon blades from his waist and shouted angrily, "If you have the guts, say that again." Before Chu Xiao could speak, Wang Jin shouted in a sharp voice, "Stop it, all of you!" The great master of oneness of heaven and men was angry, and it was Wang Jin, the deputy director of the front department and the eldest of the five heroes, Chang Buhui, who immediately pulled Wu Tiandong and said in a low voice, "Fourth brother, calm down, put away your blades." Chang Buhui had the highest reputation among the five heroes of Jiangdong. Since his eldest brother had spoken, Wu Tiandong had to put away his blades unwillingly. Wang Jin snorted coldly and said, "From now on, Qiu Zhenxing's case will be handed over to Chu Xiao of the Guanzhong torture room. Official Chu is here. The others must listen to Official Chu's command. For the sake of Qiu Dongmao, the five of you can watch from the side. But if you dare to make trouble, I don't care if you are the five heroes or the five mice. Get out of here." After all, Qiu Zhenxing was a member of the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. Over the years, he had also obtained a lot of fine horses for the Eastern Qi Imperial Court, so he could be regarded as conscientious. Even if the Eastern Qi royal family wanted to win people's hearts, they had to find out the truth of this matter. Now that Qiu Dongmao was Qiu Zhenxing's only bloodline son, it was estimated that he would receive some preferential treatment from the Eastern Qi Imperial Court in the future, so Wang Jin gave him face. Otherwise, even if the five heroes of Jiangdong had a great reputation in Jianghu, so what? They were just a few Jianghu ruffians, and he did not take them seriously at all. If he asked them to get out, he would do it. At this time, Chang Buhui and the others did not have time to be angry at Wang Jin's tone. They were more surprised by the identity of Chu Xiao. Previously, they only knew that the person who came was from the Guanzhong torture room, but they did not expect it to be Chu Xiao, who had shown extraordinary talent in the God Weapon Conference a few days ago. In fact, Chu Xiao's reputation in the land of Eastern Qi was even greater than that in the Guanzhong torture room. After all, most of those who witnessed Chu Xiao's great power in the God Weapon Conference were warriors of Eastern Qi. The five heroes of Jiangdong were all from the Eastern Qi, so they had naturally heard of Chu Xiao's reputation. There was a hint of seriousness in their eyes. This person was not someone to be trifled with. Before and after the start of the Divine Weapon Conference, those who went against him were either dead or crippled. Ordinary people could only see Chu Xiao's reputation, but they could see the ruthlessness and savagery that was hidden deep in Chu Xiu's bones. Chang Buhui quietly pulled Wu Tiandong's arm, indicating that he should not have a conflict with Chu Xiu for the time being. This time, they were here to protect Qiu Dongmao. Since Qiu Zhenqing's family was destroyed, Qiu Dongmao, as the only son of Qiu Zhenqing, might also be in danger. At the same time, they also wanted to avenge their former benefactor, Qiu Zhenqing. It was meaningless to have a conflict with Chu Xiu here. Chapter 278. After the scene calmed down, Chu Xiu did not bother with the 5 people. He directly ordered Chu Xiaoda and the others, "Go in and start investigating." Chu Xiaoda and the others nodded and began to enter the various rooms of the manor to investigate the traces and examine the bodies. At this time, Qiu Dongmao said, "Since the people from the Guanzhong torture room are here, can I see my father's body now?" Chang Buhui and the others all stared at Chu Xiu. Although they did not want to have any conflict with Chu Xiu, it would be too much for Chu Xiu to refuse their son's small request to see his father's body. Qiu Zhenqing was their benefactor, and Qiu Dongmao was Qiu Zhenqing's only son. Of course, they had to stand up for Qiu Dongmao. This time, Chu Xiu did not make things difficult for him. He just said faintly, "Sure, but you'd better not touch anything. Otherwise, you won't be able to bear the consequences if you damage the scene." Wu Tiandong snorted coldly, and the others did not dare to refute. They directly brought Qiu Dongmao in to see Qiu Zhenqing's body. The bodies of the Qiu family were placed in an empty room. The Dragon Rider's imperial army had already preserved them in ice coffins. Qiu Zhenqing's appearance was that of a middle-aged man in his 50s. He had stepped into the 3-flower realm very late, so his appearance was a little old, but his appearance was still square and imposing. At this time, there were no wounds on Qiu Zhenqing's body, but his face was gray and exuded a strange greenish-black color, which looked very evil. After seeing Qiu Zhenqing's body, Qiu Dongmao seemed to have broken down in an instant. He lay in front of Qiu Zhenqing's ice coffin and cried loudly. He cried as if his heart was broken, and he looked very miserable. On the side, Chang Buhui comforted him, "Young Master Qiu, our benefactor has passed away. Please restrain your grief. The most important thing now is to find the murderer and kill him to comfort our benefactor's spirit in heaven." Qiu Dongmao nodded sadly, but he still couldn't help but cry. When Chu Xiu saw this scene, he frowned slightly. A strange feeling welled up in his heart, and the source of this strange feeling was autumn and winter. Chu Xiu wasn't a good person, and he didn't mind using the greatest evil to figure out a person. Qiu Dongmao was Qiu Zhenqing's illegitimate child. In fact, according to Qiu Zhenqing's strength and status, Qiu Dongmao was also one of his children. There was no such thing as an illegitimate child. In the end, because of Qiu Zhenqing's vow, as Qiu Zhenqing's son, he could stay by his father's side and be carefully taught. In the future, he could even become the heir of the Pegasus farm. With the support of Eastern Qi, he could look into the martial arts world and inherit Qiu Zhenqing's connections. His future was limitless. Qiu Dongmao, on the other hand, could only be left in Shangyang County. Everything he received was pitifully little, and he could only see his father a few times a year. Qiu Zhenqing's eldest son, Qiu Dongning, already had the strength of the inner Qi realm. Qiu Dongmao was obviously over 20 years old, but he was still in the blood condensation realm. The difference was like heaven and earth. If it was Chu Xiu in this situation, he would definitely feel resentment. It should be said that anyone would feel that it was unfair. However, Qiu Dongmao's expression was so sorrowful and sincere. Either he was really a filial person who only cared about the relationship between father and son, and didn't care about his own treatment at all. Or, Qiu Dongmao was acting, but his acting was very good. He ignored the reasonableness of it. His heartbroken appearance made it seem like his father had died. Even Chu Xiu couldn't find any fault with it. Of course, his father had indeed died. However, compared to the former, Chu Xiu still believed the latter more. Human nature was evil. How many people who grew up in such an environment could have a healthy mentality? At this time, Cheng Zhouhai said lightly, "Young Master Qiu, please step aside. I want to check Qiu Zhenqing's body." As he said that, Cheng Zhouhai took out a small knife. The edge of the knife was still shining with a cold light. Qiu Dongmao's expression changed. How do you want to check? Before Cheng Zhouhai could say anything, Chu Xiu said lightly, Young Master Qiu, how we check doesn't seem to have anything to do with you. Do we, the Guanzhong torture room, have to report everything to you? Qiu Dongmao's expression was sorrowful. He pointed at Cheng Zhouhai and said, he wanted to destroy my father's body. Do I have to stand by and watch? At this time, Cheng Buhui pulled Qiu Dongmao to the side and said, Young Master Qiu, the Guanzhong torture room's methods of checking traces and investigating cases are still trustworthy. With the Guanzhong torture room taking action, I believe we can smoothly find the murderer who killed Father Benefactor. Hearing Cheng Buhui's words, Qiu Dongmao stopped talking. He stood aside, but his eyes were fixed on Cheng Zhouhai. Cheng Zhouhai began to check the appearance of Qiu Zhenqing's body skillfully. In the end, he took off the clothes of the body. There was a dark purple palm print on Qiu Zhenqing's chest. This made everyone look at Chu Xiu subconsciously. With the announcement of the Longhu list, some traces of Chu Xiu's martial arts were also written down by the people from Wind Sweeping Tower. Many people in the Jianghu knew that there was an evil palm technique in Chu Xiu's martial arts. It would leave such a mark on a person's body. Then, the demonic flame would enter the body and burn the person's meridians and internal organs. However, no one thought that Qiu Zhenqing's death had anything to do with Chu Xiu. When Qiu Zhenqing died, Chu Xiu was still in seclusion in the Guanzhong torture room. Moreover, Qiu Zhenqing was a great master who had stepped into the oneness of heaven and man realm for many years. Even if Chu Xiu were to kill him, he would not be able to. There were many palm techniques in the Jianghu that could leave such a mark. Cheng Zhouhai cut open Qiu Zhenqing's body. He saw that Qiu Zhenqing's internal organs had begun to rot and turn black, emitting a strong stench. Cheng Zhouhai frowned. He took out some strange tools and even medicine bottles and other things and examined them carefully. It was not until 15 minutes later that he sewed up Qiu Zhenqing's body again. After examining the other bodies, he finally let out a sigh of relief. Chu Xiu asked, "What's the result?" Cheng Zhouhai said in a deep voice, "The cause of Qiu Zhenqing's death was an expert who used an extremely evil palm force to hit his chest. The palm force directly shattered Cheng Zhouhai's meridians and injured his internal organs. He was killed with one palm strike. There were traces of a struggle on the body. The killer should not be a martial Dao master, but a great master at the oneness of heaven and man realm. However, his strength was stronger than Qiu Zhenqing." Everyone present was stunned. Cheng Zhouhai was talking nonsense. If the killer was not as strong as Qiu Zhenqing, then how did Qiu Zhenqing die? However, Cheng Zhouhai then said, they were both at the oneness of heaven and man realm, but Qiu Zhenqing died too easily. The killer's palm was the main cause of death, but the secondary cause of death was because Qiu Zhenqing was poisoned by a chronic poison called July begonia, or a kind of spiritual medicine with slight poison. The July begonia is produced in Miaojiang and only blooms under the moonlight in July every year. Its pharmacology is complicated. It can condense true qi and strengthen meridians. It is a good material for refining several kinds of healing medicine. However, if the July begonia is not refined, it is slightly poisonous. Long-term consumption can slowly solidify the meridians in the body. Not only will the person be crippled, but it will also cause the true qi to backfire and there is a risk of serious injury. The reason why Qiu Zhenqing was killed so easily was because there were some traces of solidification in the meridians in his body when he attacked. Therefore, he was a step slower when he attacked. For a martial artist of this level, being a step slower would mean death. In the end, the opponent found an opportunity and killed him with one palm strike. However, the poison in Qiu Zhenqing's body was also very strange. The July begonia is colorless and tasteless. Strictly speaking, it is not even considered a poison. Therefore, poisoning is a subtle process, especially for a martial artist of Qiu Zhenqing's level. As long as he does not attack with all his strength, he will not notice any abnormalities. Moreover, no matter how many July begonia he eats, he will not be backfired by the true qi. Therefore, I feel that the July begonia seems to have been planted for someone else. The people in Qiu Zhenqing's manor all have the July begonia's poison in their bodies, especially Qiu Zhenqing's son, Qiu Dongning. He is only at the internal invulnerability realm. His astral qi flows, and his meridians are not too tough. If he takes the July begonia for a few more months, the person who will be crippled will be him. Cheng Zhouhai said all the things he had detected in one breath. Chu Xiu also nodded at the side. This time, it was also fortunate that Guan Xiu had the foresight to send Cheng Zhouhai and the others. Otherwise, if Chu Xiu came, he would at most be able to see that Qiu Zhenxing was killed by a palm strike. As for the July begonia's poison, he would definitely not be able to see it. Can you see the murderer's background? Chu Xiu asked. Cheng Zhouhai hesitated for a moment, then shook his head and said, I can't see it just from the corpse. The time it took for the attack was too short. Both sides did not even exchange 10 moves before Qiu Zhenxing was killed. Therefore, there were almost no traces left. Furthermore, the traces left behind by the palm strike should not be the signature martial arts of the major sects or rogue cultivators in the Jianghu. It could be a martial art created by someone or opened from an ancient secret box. A martial art that is unknown to outsiders. Furthermore, I feel that the person who poisoned him and the murderer are not the same person. If both sides are the same person, then the other party should be familiar with the July begonia's characteristics. They should know that this medicine can only affect experts of Qiu Zhenxing's level and not directly kill him. In the end, the murderer took the risk of Qiu Zhenxing being discovered. The July begonia in Qiu Zhenxing's body had already accumulated for a period of time before he took action. According to my speculation, the murderer should not know that Qiu Zhenxing was poisoned. Chu Xiu touched his chin. He pondered for a moment and asked, when were Qiu Zhenxing and the others poisoned? Cheng Zhouhai said, about a month ago. However, with Qiu Zhenxing's cultivation, the July begonia's poison would no longer continue to worsen after 10 days. As for the others, the poison in their bodies continues to worsen. Chu Xiu nodded and suddenly turned his head. He asked Qiu Dongmao, young Master Qiu, where were you a month ago? Chapter 279. Chu Xiu's sudden question caused everyone present to be stunned. Qiu Dongmao was about to say something. He opened his mouth subconsciously but immediately swallowed it back. He said angrily, of course I'm in Shangyang. Official Chu, what do you mean? Are you suspecting that I poisoned my father? Cheng Buhui looked at Chu Xiu with an unfriendly gaze and said coldly, Official Chu, the Guangzhong torture room is indeed good at detecting traces and investigating cases, but everything needs evidence. Why are you asking young Master Qiu this question? The Jiangdong 5 heroes had escorted Qiu Dongmao all the way to the Pegasus farm, and the 5 of them had a good impression of him. Qiu Zhenxing was generous, and he advocated simplicity. However, his eldest son, Qiu Dongning, was somewhat arrogant and foppish. The 5 of them had met him before, and they did not have a good impression of him. Qiu Dongmao, on the other hand, was humble and polite, and he was a kind and filial person. He was often sad about Qiu Zhenxing's death, and the 5 of them saw it. They had a good impression of him. However, Chu Xiu was questioning Qiu Dongmao as if he was interrogating a criminal, which displeased the 5 of them. Chu Xiu said calmly, don't be so agitated. I'm just asking. Why are you so sensitive? Qiu Dongmao's eyes were filled with anger, but Chu Xiu did not care at all. In fact, he did not care how Qiu Zhenxing died. What he really cared about was where Qiu Zhenxing's cultivation method was. If it had been taken away, or if Qiu Zhenxing had destroyed it after memorizing it, Chu Xiu would be in trouble. When he asked Qiu Dongmao that question just now, it was really just a casual question. He just wanted to trick the other party. Human nature was evil. From the beginning, Chu Xiu did not believe that there would be people in this world who did not have any resentment after being treated so unfairly. July begonia's poison could not kill Qiu Zhenxing, but it could kill Qiu Dongning. Who would benefit the most from Qiu Dongning's death? Of course, it was autumn and winter. Qiu Zhenxing needed someone to inherit his martial arts, his horse breeding skills, and his position as the owner of the Pegasus farm. This person was definitely Qiu Dongning in the past. If Qiu Dongning was dead, then it could only be Qiu Dongmao. At this time, Chu Xiaoda and the others had also finished investigating the other parts of the manor and returned to report. Chu Xiaoda shook his head and said, the other party only came to kill. Other than the traces of murder in the manor, nothing else was touched. Their methods were very direct and efficient, leaving no traces behind. Wang Jin said with a frown, Official Chu, don't tell me you guys have no clue at all? The The Guangzhong torture room had always been famous for investigating traces and solving cases. The professionalism that Cheng Zhouhai displayed just now was indeed good. If it were someone else, even a martial Dao master would not be able to see through it. But the problem was that the Eastern Qi Imperial Court wanted the murderer and an explanation. It was useless to argue about anything else. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "Don't be anxious, Eunuch Wang. The investigation of the Guangzhong torture room also requires looking at traces and clues. At present, the murderer has done it too cleanly. We definitely won't be able to find him in a short time. Otherwise, if the case was so simple, Eastern Qi would be able to solve it themselves. Why would they come to my Guangzhong torture room? Rest assured, Eunuch Wang. We will definitely give the Eastern Qi Imperial Court an explanation for this case." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, although Wang Jin was still a little dissatisfied, he still nodded and said, "All right, I'll go back to the Imperial City to report. I'll be back in a day or two. I hope that official Chu will have clues by then." Having said that, Wang Jin turned and left. At this time, Wu Tiandong suddenly muttered in a low voice with slight disdain, "Guangzhong torture room? That's all there is to it." Chu Xiu suddenly looked up. The heavenly demon dance in his hand had already been unsheathed. With a deep demonic aura, it directly slashed at Wu Tiandong. No one present had expected Chu Xiu to suddenly attack. Even Feng Zhenqi was unable to react in time. Wu Tiandong was startled. Instinctively, he held the autumn moon dual sabers in his hands horizontally in front of him. The sabers were like a full moon, bursting with dazzling saber light. However, he was still sent flying by Chu Xiu's saber. He leaned against the wall behind him. His hands couldn't help trembling, and he couldn't even hold the sabers. Chang Buhui and the other three immediately drew their weapons. Their gang qi exploded around them as they bellowed, "Chu Xiu! What's the meaning of this?" The 5 heroes of Jiangdong were sworn brothers, and they were as close as siblings. Even if the person in front of them was Chu Xiu, who had the Guangzhong torture room as his backing, they still dared to attack him. Chu Xiu put away his heavenly demon dance and said slowly, "If you don't know how to speak, then don't speak. Do you think an idiot like you can slander the Guangzhong torture room? People have to be responsible for their own words and actions. You're already so old, yet you can't even control your own mouth. You must know that disaster comes from the mouth. If your mouth stinks, then don't speak. Do you understand?" Wu Tiandong glared at Chu Xiu. His face was filled with shame and anger. At the same time, there was also a little fear in his heart. He and Chu Xiu were both 3 Flower Realm warriors, but Chu Xiu's saber just now made him feel a sense of powerlessness. It was a sense of powerlessness that he couldn't resist at all. Feng Zhenqi said coldly, "If the 5 of you continue to cause trouble, then get out of here. And Chu Xiu, you better restrain yourself. I, Eastern Qi, invited you here to solve problems, not to cause trouble." As a general of the Dragon Riders' Imperial Army, Feng Zhenqi valued the word rules the most. The Dragon Riders' Imperial Army also required strict obedience. Moreover, Chu Xiu's personality was simply temperamental. Just now, he attacked without warning. If such a person became his subordinate, he would definitely teach him a lesson. Chu Xiu shrugged and said, "If others don't provoke me, I naturally won't bother to provoke others." Turning his head, Chu Xiu said to Chu Xiaoda, "Take me to the manor again. Turn it upside down and see if there are any secret rooms or something like that." Qiu Zhenxing was quite popular in Jianghu, but now he was killed for no reason. There may be some hidden story behind this. Chu Xiaoda nodded and began to search the manor again with Chu Xiu. This time, Qiu Dongmao also followed closely behind Chu Xiu, as if he was worried that Chu Xiu had taken some of Qiu Zhenxing's belongings. In fact, Chu Xiu was indeed looking for traces of that technique, even though he knew that it was unlikely that Qiu Zhenxing would put that technique out in the open. Nowadays, most of the top techniques were engraved on the technique jade slips. This way, it was easier to understand the true meaning of martial arts within. There were also some techniques that were written with special materials on special items, just like the Great Sorrow of Heaven and Earth Yin and Yang that Chu Xiu had obtained. They also contained the true meaning of martial arts. This kind of thing could be found at a glance. The Qiu family's manor was only so big. There were less than 10 houses, and they found nothing after searching all of them. At this time, the sky was almost dark. Chu Xiao and the others were not in the mood to continue investigating, so they bid farewell to Fang Zhenqi. However, Qiu Dongmao insisted on keeping vigil for Qiu Zhenqing, but he was chased out by Fang Zhenqi. As the private army of the Eastern Qi royal family, the Dragon Rider's imperial army could be said to be strict. Even if Qiu Dongmao was Qiu Zhenqing's son, he could not stay here alone. The place where Chu Xiao and the others rested was in the Pegasus farm. There were some guest rooms there, so the people of Eastern Qi arranged for Chu Xiao to stay here. In the guest room, Chu Xiao looked at the people around him and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, you know that I am not very good at this. What suggestions do you have for me now?" Zhong Ping shook his head indifferently. He was from the Criminal Investigations Department, and he only knew how to kill people. It was best not to look for him for other things. Wang Qianping smiled and said, "This time, Hallmaster let Official Chu lead the team. I will do whatever Official Chu says." Along the way, Wang Qianping behaved in an extremely low-key manner. He did whatever Chu Xiao asked him to do. He did not overtly agree but covertly disobeyed, as if there was really no grudge between him and Chu Xiao. However, Chu Xiao would not be fooled by him. This guy was like a smiling tiger. When they first met, he had already dug a trap for Chu Xiao. Who knew what he was planning now? The only people present who were willing to help were Chu Xiaoda and Cheng Zhouhai. The two of them looked at each other, and Cheng Zhouhai said, "This case is really a bit tricky. First of all, from the corpses and the traces of fighting, there are pitifully few clues. There is no clue at all. This clue has been cut off. Moreover, Qiu Zhenqing's reputation in the pugilistic world is really good. It is almost impossible to find any enemies. Even if there is a grudge occasionally, it is not to the extent of killing people. In fact, he does not even have the ability to kill people. The two most important results have been cut off. Even if we use the stupidest method, which is to investigate Qiu Zhenqing's enemies one by one, we can't do it." The few people present looked at Chu Xiao. Although Chu Xiao was not good at these things, Chu Xiao was the one leading the team this time. If the case was not completed, Chu Xiao's responsibility was greater than theirs. It was impossible for him to stay out of it. Chu Xiao pondered for a moment and said, "I don't know much about this, but I only know that any pugilistic world killing can't escape two words: hatred and profit. Qiu Zhenqing has almost no enemies, so we might as well guess that the other party killed him because of profit. Qiu Zhenqing must have touched someone's profit, which was why he was killed." The traces on Qiu Zhenqing's corpse during the day also showed that the person who poisoned him and the person who killed him were two different people. It is obvious that the person who wanted to kill Qiu Zhenqing suddenly had the idea. If we do the opposite and ignore the clues in the manor, we will go outside to see where he has been and what he has done during this period of time. I reckon we will gain something. Cheng Zhouhai thought about it and said, "This is feasible. We can give it a try. Now that the clues are cut off, we can only do this." After the plan was made, everyone rested for the time being. On the second day, Chu Xiao and the rest asked the people under the Pegasus farm and found out that Qiu Zhenqing spent most of his time in the manor and the Pegasus farm. He only went to the Ji State Prefecture a month ago. Chu Xiao and the rest immediately went to the Ji State Prefecture to investigate. Chapter 280. If one were to talk about who was the most well-informed in a prefecture, it would definitely be the local tyrant in the prefecture. Chu Xiao vaguely remembered that the Ji Province Prefecture's Purple Cloud restaurant was the local tyrant, the 5 Yuan Gang's business. Hence, after arriving at the Ji Province Prefecture, Chu Xiao went straight to the Purple Cloud restaurant. At this time, in the Purple Cloud restaurant, the 5 Yuan Gang's hallmaster, Smiling Tiger Han Kuei, was playing with a 9-dragon coin in boredom. Some time ago, during the God Weapon Convention, the Purple Cloud restaurant's business was booming. Even though the fight between Chu Xiao and the disciples of Sword King City had destroyed a floor of the Purple Cloud restaurant, the Purple Cloud restaurant still made a lot of money. Now, it was much more deserted. At this time, a few people stepped into the Purple Cloud restaurant. When Han Kuei saw the face of the person opposite him, he trembled violently. The 9-dragon coin in his hand also fell to the ground. Why did this killing god appear here? Although Han Kuei was shocked, he still put on a flattering smile on his face. He walked over and said, Why did official Chu come to my Purple Cloud restaurant again? Chu Xiao said with a faint smile. You don't welcome me? Han Kuei hurriedly said. Absolutely not. I'm more than happy that official Chu can visit my small Purple Cloud restaurant. Official Chu and the rest, please go upstairs. I'll go prepare a banquet for you. Chu Xiao waved his hand and said, There's no hurry. I came today to ask you something. Han Kuei immediately said, Official Chu, if there's something you want to ask, this lowly one will definitely tell you everything he knows. This isn't the place to talk. Let's talk somewhere else, Chu Xiao said. After Han Kuei found a quiet guest room, Chu Xiao asked, Do you know the Pegasus Ranch's owner, Qiu Zhenxing? Han Kuei's eyes revealed a hint of understanding. He said, Of course I do. Official Chu, are you here for this case this time? Qiu Zhenxing was very famous in eastern Qi. Now that he was killed, the Ji province prefecture was so close to the Pegasus Ranch, so of course they got the news immediately. Thinking of Chu Xiao's identity in Guanzhong torture room, Han Kuei easily guessed that he should have been invited by the Eastern Qi Imperial Court to investigate this case. Chu Xiao said, Qiu Zhenxing came to the Ji State Prefecture some time ago. I want to know what Qiu Zhenxing did there and who he met. The more detailed, the better. Han Kuei's mouth moved. Just as he was about to say something, Chu Xiao said coldly, Don't refuse and don't make excuses. Han Qing was to say something. You to I to Han to say, Chu I be I have to say the Chu Chu you I has be I. Chu 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 Xiao, also I won't treat you badly if you help me Chu Xiao. Last time, I destroyed a floor of your Ziyun restaurant, so I'll compensate you this time. As he spoke, Chu Xiao took out a bottle of 6th Revolution pills. For a martial artist like Han Kuei, this was something that could only be found by chance. Hearing this, Han Kuei's face revealed a helpless expression. He knew that he couldn't refuse this matter today. Therefore, Han Kuei took the bottle of pills on the table, called a member of the 5 Yuan gang, and whispered a few words in his ear before letting him leave. In less than an hour, the member came back with the news and handed it to Han Kuei. Han Kuei handed the news to Chu Xiao and said, Official Chu, Qiu Zhenxing did come to Ji Province Prefecture a month ago, but he only went to the Dragon Gathering Pavilion for less than an hour and left. After that, he did not communicate with anyone. As for why Qiu Zhenxing went to the Dragon Gathering Pavilion and who he met, it's not something that I can know. After all, the Dragon Gathering Pavilion is not an ordinary place. With the strength of the 5 Yuan gang, only the gang leader is qualified to enter it, and it's only the lower 4 floors. A strange look appeared in Chu Xiao's eyes. All right, I got it. You can leave first. Han Kuei immediately left with the pills as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Chu Xiao said in a deep voice, Everyone, do you see anything wrong? Cheng Zhouhai and the rest nodded. It was such an obvious clue, of course, they could see it. Qiu Zhenxing was a simple person. Whether it was his habit in the past or he was putting on a show, he had persisted in this habit all his life. In the end, he went to a luxurious place like the Dragon Gathering Pavilion for a meal. It did not seem right whether he invited others or others invited him. Let's go to the Dragon Gathering Pavilion and meet that Prince Anil. At this time, Prince Anil, Jiang Wenyuan, was standing on the 9th floor of the Dragon Gathering Pavilion, looking down at the Ji State Prefecture below. Beside him stood an ordinary-looking middle-aged martial artist. It was Mr. Liu from the Phaseless Demon Sect. The Eastern Qi royal family has invited the people from the Guanzhong torture room. When you killed Qiu Zhenxing, did you leave any traces? Jiang Wenyuan suddenly asked. Mr. Liu grinned and said, Don't worry, Your Highness. The Phaseless Demon Sect is professional when it comes to killing. I have never used my bone-eroding heart-pressing palm in front of outsiders. Even the Guanzhong torture room will not be able to see it. However, I still have some doubts. Why did you kill Qiu Zhenxing? Didn't you join forces with that person? Jiang Wenyuan sneered. Join forces? What a joke. None of the people with the surname Liu are good. They were just using me. Do they really think I don't know? Since the water is already muddy, let's make it even muddier. If the Liu family doesn't fight amongst themselves, how can I have a chance? Mr. Liu, who was at the side, smiled and didn't say anything. He couldn't be bothered with the messy internal affairs of the Eastern Qi. After all, the phaseless demon sect was only doing this for money. However, recently, Jiang Wenyuan was getting more and more impatient. If this went on, the phaseless demon sect would have to consider changing partners. At this time, someone suddenly came to report that Chu Xiao had brought the people from the Guanzhong torture room to check the records of the Dragon Gathering Pavilion's guests. This stunned Jiang Wenyuan. He suddenly turned his gaze to Mr. Liu and sneered. "Didn't you say that your side did a clean job? Why would the people from the Guanzhong torture room come to my Dragon Gathering Pavilion?" Mr. Liu froze for a moment, but then he smiled. "Your Highness, you're wrongly accusing me. If I'm exposed, the people from the punishment hall will only be able to find the phaseless demon sect. They will definitely find me first, and then through me they can find you, Your Highness. But now, they came directly to the Dragon Gathering Pavilion. It's obvious that you exposed yourself here. That's why they found out. I told you that you attacked Qiu Zhenxing not long after he came to the Dragon Gathering Pavilion. Being so impatient, it's hard to guarantee that no one will find out." Jiang Wenyuan's face darkened. He sneered. "Find out? If they have the ability, then they can come and check my Dragon Gathering Pavilion. Even if it's the people from the Eastern Qi royal family, they can't do as they please in my Dragon Gathering Pavilion, let alone the Guanzhong torture room. I'd like to see who dares to come and check my Dragon Gathering Pavilion." At this time, on the first floor of the Dragon Gathering Pavilion, several warriors from the Dragon Gathering Pavilion were blocking the first floor, confronting Chu Xiao and the others. These people were all Jiang Wenyuan's followers. For example, Dominating Sword, Cha Kuei, Blood Rain Cold Light Sword, Xiao Ting, and Uncle Qi, who had fought with Chu Xiao before. They were all people that Chu Xiao was familiar with. There were countless warriors watching from the side. There had never been anyone who dared to cause trouble in the Dragon Gathering Pavilion in recent years. Uncle Qi looked at Chu Xiao coldly and said, "Chu Xiao, don't think that just because you won some fame in the God Weapon Conference that you have the right to do as you please in my Dragon Gathering Pavilion. This is Eastern Qi, not your Guanzhong torture room." Chu Xiao said plainly, "Old man, don't be angry. Everything has to be reasonable. I don't want to make things difficult for you, but this time, I'm representing the Guanzhong torture room to investigate the case in Eastern Qi. Why? Isn't your Dragon Gathering Pavilion people from Eastern Qi?" Uncle Qi scoffed and said, "Qiu Zhenxing is dead. You can go to the Pegasus farm to investigate the case, but why did you come to my Dragon Gathering Pavilion? It's very simple. I suspect that Qiu Zhenxing's death has something to do with your Dragon Gathering Pavilion." Chu Xiao's words were earth-shattering, and everyone present was stunned. Because in their impression, the Dragon Gathering Pavilion had nothing to do with Qiu Zhenxing from the Pegasus farm. Why would Jiang Wenyuan kill Qiu Zhenxing out of boredom? Even if he killed Qiu Zhenxing, he wouldn't get the Pegasus farm. Right at this moment, Jiang Wenyuan brought his men downstairs and said coldly, "Chu Xiao, if you dare to spout nonsense again, even if the Guanzhong torture room and Guanxiu are behind you, they still can't protect you. I have no enmity with Qiu Zhenxing, so why would I kill him?" Chu Xiao said plainly, "Your Highness, you're wrong. I never said that you killed Qiu Zhenxing. I only said that Qiu Zhenxing's death has something to do with the Dragon Gathering Pavilion. Instead, Your Highness, you keep saying that you killed Qiu Zhenxing. This is a little like confessing without being pressed." Jiang Wenyuan scoffed and said, "Don't play word games with me. The Dragon Gathering Pavilion is my business. If you say that Qiu Zhenxing's death has something to do with the Dragon Gathering Pavilion, isn't that saying that I killed Qiu Zhenxing?" Chu Xiao shook his head and said, "That's not what I meant. It's just that according to reliable information, Qiu Zhenxing came to your Dragon Gathering Pavilion a month ago, and in the end, he was killed a month later. This is exactly what I want to investigate." Jiang Wenyuan flicked his sleeves and said with a cold smile, "What a joke. There are countless martial artists that come and go to my Dragon Gathering Pavilion on a daily basis. Who in the pugilistic world knows if they're dead or alive tomorrow? If they die, could it be that they're going to blame it on my Dragon Gathering Pavilion?" Chu Xiao took a step forward and said in a low voice, "Everyone in the world knows that Qiu Zhenxing's character is simple. As a Heaven Man Unity Realm great expert, he himself only lives in a small manor. In the end, a month ago, Qiu Zhenxing suddenly came to your Dragon Gathering Pavilion, this place to squander money. Now, I'm very curious who Qiu Zhenxing came to your dragon gathering pavilion to see. Now, I want to check the guest records of your dragon gathering pavilion. This shouldn't be too much, right? You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.